Ruby, on your bed. Please, on your bed. On your bed. Good evening. How are you? Good evening. Hello, Con. Hello, Richard. Try to say hi to everybody here. Jiltman. Oh, well, a lot of people are jumping in now. Furman Montoya. Never heard that name before. Cool, cool. Mustafa. Hello. Spirit World. That's a cool name. Hello. How you doing? Boy, was today an interesting day. Lots to talk about in terms of financial stuff. Today was what we call Fed Day. The Federal Reserve spoke today. Jerome Powell. Yeah, hello. What's the name? Mr. Addy? Is that what it's called? Okay. How you doing? It's hard to read those blocks. Yeah, thank you. I'm doing okay. Got to get outside, which always feels great. I went and played something called disc golf. Anybody ever heard of that before? It's, for those who don't know, it's where you go out. It's like a course. It's laid out like a golf course, but you take like Frisbee discs and you throw them as if you're hitting golf balls kind of thing. And it was fun. I went out with a good friend of mine who talk about a lot of cool stuff. He's a guy who does a lot of mindfulness work. So he's in a whole different realm. No, I don't do ultimate Frisbee. I mean, I'm not that good. I just went out for the hell of it. It was a nice day and I have some basic set of discs. I mean, bottom line is I'm just a hack. I just went out for fun. We played a course that was deep in the woods, and so there was trees everywhere. And I probably hit, I don't know, I could have been accused of tree abuse. That's how it went. But it's fun. In fact, the course that I was on, and my friend knows a lot more about this than I do, he said that it's rated in the top 5 in the entire country. I don't know. I didn't know that. But it was fun anyway. There were deer all over the place. I took Ruby, but she stayed in the car because she would have freaked out. But it was fun. Yeah, I try to exercise, although I've not been able to exercise the way I used to. I used to work out 6 days a week. I would do boot camp classes. I would lift weights. I would do yoga class. I did all that stuff. And I just, since the Gulf War stuff has been kicking my ass, I just don't have it. I was just talking to my VA therapist counselor today about that. Like, I just can't do it anymore. I just feel sick all the time, unfortunately. But I don't want to bitch because there are so many great things to be grateful for and so many other people that have big problems, right? So, but it's amazing. I've been thinking a lot about, as you get older, you start to think about the fact that time just goes by so fast. But we got plenty to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about some of the crazy stuff that's happening in Gaza, which is just never seems to end. We talk about Senator Chris Van Hollen, who made some pretty serious statements on the Senate floor. He's a Democrat from Maryland. He talked to Amy Goodman today at Democracy Now! And, we're going to talk about Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of Donald Trump. Some of the benevolent things he said. I'm saying that tongue-in-cheek. If you didn't hear about him. Someone in the comments just joined named Muslim Zionist. So anybody who has the name Zionist in their name, interesting choice of words. Anyway, I wish things were different. I wish that there would have been a way for there to be a safe homeland for Jewish people that didn't involve so much disruption and so many problems that have come out of this, right? Because I think ultimately what everybody wants is a safe place for everybody to be. And so, again, we talk about this a lot. I know a lot of people don't agree with my point of view, but I've never heard a convincing argument to the contrary. What happened in... Somebody says, have you always hated Jews? No, I've not always hated Jews. I don't hate Jews. Don't misconstrue my criticism for the way in which the state was created, which it was created under situations that caused a lot of harm to others. That doesn't mean I'm not for the people who are able to have the benefit of their state. I'm happy they got a place to be safe from harm. I think that's a wonderful thing, as I think everyone should. But it doesn't mean that it came without incident, and it's not fair to talk about it. And that doesn't mean hatred. That means analysis. So no, I don't hate anybody who's Jewish. I don't hate anybody. But I've said some stupid shit sometimes, which I think everybody does something wrong in their lives. Mine happen to come out in ways that weren't that pleasant, but it is what it is. But the point I'm trying to make is this. Just because you're against something that's political doesn't mean you're against the people in which the politics occurred. I think that's fair to say. Just as I criticize the state of Israel, meaning the government and the entity as it behaves, doesn't mean I condemn the people. Most people in a country are just everyday people. Most people who are Jewish are just everyday people, right? There's no reason to be, angry at anybody for just who they are. Who cares? Somebody says, should Jews have a state in a different location? Well, in fairness, as the Balfour Declaration was worked on, there were conversations about other places to create the Jewish homeland. There was a place in Argentina that was considered. There was a couple locations in Africa, specifically Uganda, that were considered. But eventually it was decided upon that it would be created in historic Palestine. I'm not a total expert. I'm not claiming to be a total expert at anything. I'm just sharing with you the history that I'm aware of and my take on it. If you have a different take, that's fine. I actually am very respectful of other people's points of view. Anybody who knows, if you come up on the panel here and talk, I'm never mean to somebody. I don't disparage them for what they believe, although I get a lot of that in return. But somebody says, in the comments here, saying something like, how long have you hated Jews? That's a terrible assumption to make about somebody. If they disagree with you, I don't say that you hate Palestinians if you disagree with the point of view that I take. How long have you hated Arabs? That's a silly thing to say to somebody. We just happen to have a disagreement over different aspects of this conflict. And again, I learned about it totally by chance in 1989. I'm 56 years old, soon to be 57. I learned about it when I was 21, which for most Americans hasn't been part of their course of life. I just happened to, one of my classmates did a presentation on the First Intifada, which was in 1987. And I had no clue. Like most people don't really follow much stuff in the world, right? At that age, I had learned basic political stuff in class, but I wasn't too hip on international stuff. And back then, we had 3 TV stations. That was it. There was no cable. There was no internet. And you either got books or magazine articles or what you could get off TV. And that was it. So you had a very limited presentation of information, nothing like today with live video and conversations like this. Somebody keeps asking me if I've ever been to Israel. No, I've not been to Israel, and I've not been to the occupied territories or Gaza. What I have done is I've studied a lot of people who have. And I've studied both the Israeli point of view, read books by Alan Dershowitz, Benny Morris, who have different points of view than people like Norman Finkelstein, who I've also read, and Elian Pape, and lots of other very smart, very considerate human beings who have no personal benefit by interpreting the events of the past in the way they have. It actually hurts people who speak out against the status quo if they believe otherwise. So Miko Peled, son of an Israeli general, he has every reason to keep his mouth shut and support the status quo. But when he learned the same types of things that I learned, he decided to speak up. And I call that having character. How can I understand a place that I've never been? Well, there's something called reading. There's something called learning. I've never been to the moon, but I understand it's an object about 255,000 miles from the Earth that orbits the Earth. So have you been to the moon? But you understand what the moon is, right? You can actually see it if you go outside and look in the sky if it's not cloudy. So the idea that you can't understand something, I was in the first Gulf War in a tank unit on the front lines. Now they did a lot of write-ups on the Gulf War. There's a lot of historical books about it and stuff like that. I wouldn't say to somebody who hasn't been there like I was, how can you possibly understand it? The reason you can understand things is because you study them on both sides. You try to be somebody who takes in fairness, information from both angles, tries to make heads or tails of it, and you come up with a take. Now, I'm not saying that my take is better or worse than your take. If you're somebody who disagrees with my take, that's fine. I understand that there's a different way to look at every situation. I always like to make this distinction. And if you haven't followed me for a while, most people who make these claims just haven't followed me. I think once you do follow me and you watch what I say, rather than what you hear or you think that I say, you'll understand that I come from a place of objectivity as best I can. Obviously I'm a white guy from America with relative privilege, so I got that going on. I can't change that. But what I can do is try to put as much of that aside and try to just be as fair as I can. I try to call balls and strikes. And Not everybody can do that. Maybe I'm not the best at it, but I do try, and people seem to think I do an okay job at it. So, with regards to the Israel-Palestine conflict, I understand the Israeli point of view. Israel wants security. I think Israel has every right to want security. No, I don't want any people to be under constant threat from things like rocket fire or unexpected attacks, whether it be back, 20, 30, 40 years ago, being in a cafe or a bus or a car going down the street or whatever it may be. I don't want people to be under that threat. I think that's terrible. And at the same time, I don't want a group of people to be militarily occupied and have their territory blocked in by a foreign power where everything that comes in and out is controlled by that foreign power. I don't want that either, because that's a difficult life for those people. So the question is, where do you determine what's legitimate and what isn't? So from the Israeli perspective, their state to them and their security is way more important than any other consideration. It's like, it's unfortunate that these people's lives have to be made miserable, but because of a few bad apples, it's just the way it's got to be, because Israel's needs come first. I've heard a lot of that. And then you have the other conversation, which is the Palestinian people have never lived with pure freedom. They've been subjected to peaceful protest to get past their limitations that they're in. I believe that to be the case. I don't believe the story that it was a land without a people for a people without a land. That's a bullshit story. I don't believe the story that the Arabs were offered peace 5 times, very generous deals, and they just turned it down because they're violent people. I don't believe that. And I don't believe that because the facts don't indicate that. If the facts did indicate that, I would say, hey, these people just won't agree to anything. They're just not reasonable. And I would also condemn the age group. If there was a peaceful way out of this and they still formed a militant group and they decided to attack a neighbor because they just hate them, I would condemn that. But that's not what happened here. And to say that this started, which a lot of people say, well, they started it on 10/7, so whatever happens is their fault. I've heard Ben Shapiro and others say this. And so I think what they don't acknowledge, for whatever reason, because it's not convenient, is that on 10/6, if you are someone living in Gaza or someone living in the West Bank or even an Arab citizen of Israel, you're not getting a great deal. Now, if you're an Arab citizen of Israel, you're getting a better deal because you're living inside a country that has more, Western type of setups, and it has more freedom of movement and a democratic structure somewhat, that accesses amenities and is not under the harsh and brutal and harsh treatment of the West Bank, or especially in Gaza. So that's why when they say, well, people who are in Israel who are Arab, they'd rather live there. Of course, who would want to choose to live in a blockaded territory or a territory that's occupied by the military that raids houses and shoots people when they want to, and takes you to jail for administrative detention whenever they decide that you're being disrespectful or rude, or you throw a pebble at somebody and you get 5-year jail sentence. I wouldn't want to live like that either. So that doesn't say that things are necessarily just absolutely skippy for people who are of Arab descent in Israel. It just says that they're better off in terms of their day-to-day life there than they are elsewhere. So that's not an argument, I believe. And the other argument we hear a lot is, well, if the money that these crazy leaders siphoned off in Qatar, if they just gave that to the Palestinians, the place would be booming with business. No, it wouldn't. Because whenever the Palestinian people have tried to make any advancements on any level, guess what? They are thwarted. By whom? By the Israeli government and military. That's what happens. If you don't understand that, you don't understand the history of this. Now, you can try to claim it's justified because of security, which is what a lot of people make the argument. But I think what Israel does is over and above, far over and above what is required to maintain its security. And that's the problem. I'll give you one just rock solid example of unnecessary mistreatment of others for no reason other than the military superiority gives them the ability to do so. There was a journalist, a very well-known journalist named Shireen Abu Akleh. She worked for Al Jazeera. She was like the Walter Cronkite field reporter or Anderson Cooper type person in the Arab world. Everybody knew her. Everybody loved her. She was courageous. She went out into the territories and she got good coverage, and she covered things on the ground. Well, the Israeli military, one day, an individual decided to shoot her in the neck. She was clearly wearing her press clothing. It was not confusion. It wasn't crossfire. She was hit intentionally by an Israeli gunman. That's it. That's what happened. Now, the Israelis tried to say it was just crossfire, it was an accident, all that bullshit. It was intentional. So she lay there bleeding to death. She bled to death. And the next day or two, they had her funeral. And guess who shows up at her funeral? The Israeli police and military. And what did they do? They beat the living shit out of the pallbearers and other attendees at the funeral. Now, why would they do something like that? Those people aren't causing a threat to Israel. They're peacefully assembling and mourning the death of someone who's important to them. So why would Israel do that? It's because they want to make the people so incredibly miserable and let them know who's in charge that they want to leave. They'll give up and just go so that Israel can occupy the entirety of the territory. Because the predominant mindset, unfortunately, among different administrations is the Palestinian people, the Arab, mostly Muslims, are a threat to their people, whether they are or not. That's the perception. And they're these pesky people who just won't give up and go away. And they still live on land that they feel tied to, legitimately so, because their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents lived there until they were forced off the land that they lived on. Now, you can go back 3,000 years ago and try to say that A, B, C, D, E gave you the land. Well, someone can go back 4,000 years and say the same stuff. Okay? So a lot of these arguments that I end up hearing, they just don't hold water. I understand them because they serve a certain narrative and a belief system, but I don't espouse that belief system because I'm an American. I'm not related to somebody who has an affinity for tying my identity to the Jewish homeland and to the Jewish people because I'm not a Jewish person. Not that I don't want people to be safe and free from harm. I advocate very, very, very strongly for what happened during World War II. That was an absolute horror show, and under any circumstances, I would push for the people who are under that type of horrific mistreatment to be free from it. Obviously, and it doesn't have to be Jewish people; it could have been anybody. But so, especially with that in mind, we want to make sure that no group who's been historically marginalized will be further marginalized. I'm down with that 100%. But unfortunately, in order to attain that, some really unfortunate things happen to others. And that's all that I talk about. It's not to demonize the one group of people. It's to point out the inequity and the historical injustice. That's it. And just because that kind of stuff happened in my homeland, my United States, 180, 200 years ago, doesn't mean that it makes this situation right. Because what happened on the continent on which I live was wrong. And it's happened before, it's wrong. And people will say, well, then why do you single out Israel? I don't single out Israel. Israel happens to be a country that is doing it in real time right now. That's why I'm critical of it. And so the idea would be that hopefully we can stop the ethnic cleansing of a land from its native people, because that's the right thing to do. And it's important to at least talk about it. And since we know what's going on there, not all the stuff that gets reported on the news and the different things the Israeli officials say and try to justify it and obfuscate and confuse the public, through doing things like having teams of people to modify Wikipedia and the Hasbara effort and all these fake news reports of 40 babies, that goes right on down the line. And I understand the Israelis want to serve their agenda. They want to have international support, but they're losing that. That's one of the real problems of this. I'm not saying anybody's real or not real Jews. I'm talking about indigenous residents. So, for example, the indigenous residents of North America were the Native American people, right? The people that had, sort of darker skin, and they were native tribes, and they occupied the land. They were living here for 10,000 years. Very sustainably, by the way. In relative peace, although once in a while they would fight other tribes, but it wasn't a pervasive, disastrous ethnic cleansing campaign. And then, so when the Europeans came, it was interference. They're not native to the land. And similarly, there was a small percentage of people who were ethnically Jewish who lived in the territories at the time this was all being discussed. That's irrefutable. So there are certain people who are indigenous to the land who are Jewish. It was about 6% of the population in 1900, maybe less. So you can look that up. It's all available online, to check my facts. I don't have the numbers down to the actual, to the 10th of a percent, but you get the idea. So there was overwhelming numbers of people living there who were Arab and who identified as Arabs at that time, but who believed they were part of the Palestinian region. So if you go back and look at the documents, the maps, you'll see those types of descriptions on the documents, the passports, the people. It was an administrative territory. It was like a very well refined society. It wasn't some barren desert and wasteland like the Ben Shapiro's will tell you. Ben Shapiro said this. I can't believe he said Jews like to build things, Arabs like to blow stuff up and play in raw sewage. Now, what kind of crap is that? But that, unfortunately, is sort of the idea that these Arab peoples are somehow unsophisticated, sort of dirty, uneducated, violent thugs that just can't seem to get along with anybody. You hear people say things like, why doesn't anybody want them, meaning them being the Palestinians? The point of why other nations that live adjacent to the territory, of why they are reluctant to bring in hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees is twofold. One, it's very, very logistically difficult to do that and disruptive to your society and costly. And secondly, why should a group of people that have been living on land that they identify with as their land, that the entire world views as their land, except for one adjacent country who's moved into it, why should they give them an outlet to move the people off the land by quote unquote taking them? It's not that they don't quote want them, but anytime you bring in hundreds of thousands of refugees, it's difficult. And it's really not fair to the people for them to be pushed off the land, as we're seeing right now. The efforts have been mostly to push people from north to south, which many have gone there because it's trying to be safe. But the point is, why should the people of Rafah, who are in the southern part of Gaza right now, be told they should leave? I heard this from Jared Kushner today on Democracy Now! And Jared Kushner said, and this, I'm not kidding, he said there's really plenty of opportunities to develop beachfront property in Gaza. So the people there should really be moved. That's what the guy said. Imagine if somebody came to the United States, where Jared Kushner lives in New York, and said, hey, there's some really nice waterfront property on the East River. Why doesn't Jared Kushner and his friends get the fuck out? Imagine that. I mean, people would be like, who are you to tell me to, well, exactly, who are you to tell them to leave, right? I mean, come on, you can't have these different standards in terms of being decent. Somebody says here, Toya, California, we will move them and finish off Rafah. Well, there may be an effort by the Israeli government to do that. I don't doubt that the Israelis have the ability to try that if they want to. The question is, I've heard the statement made that, hey, if we wanted to really ethnically cleanse Gaza, we could just bomb it. There's something called political constraints. It's something you should look up if you want to study politics and international conflict. Certain things, you can do them. The United States could bomb Russia right now, but it's going to lead to nuclear war, and it's going to lead to international condemnation to an extent that it's just not worth the effort to do it that way. And likewise, Israel could drop, large bombs on Gaza, or many more of them, and just obliterate the place, which they've done in the north, by the way. But they may go into Rafah and do that. And then they may blame the civilian casualties on the H group not evacuating people, which is probably what they'll do. But there are political consequences for your actions in the world. And I would argue that Israel, even if I were to be a supporter, which I'm not, but if I were, I would argue to those who support Israel, hey, the consequences of the actions being taken on that are creating all of these civilian casualties, the number just crossed 32,000 as of last night, over 13,000 of which are children. That rings with a lot of people's sense of decency as being indecent. And I think that's a normal reaction from a human standpoint. When you see tens of thousands of innocent human beings being exterminated through what Israel calls a legitimate conflict, but it's just using the tools of war to do it rather than using an AK and a rocket-propelled grenade or a knife or whatever. It doesn't matter how you kill somebody. They still end up dead. And then you make all these stories up about human shields and these other lies that are just completely silly. Even the American president said, you have to stop the indiscriminate bombing of civilians. So Chuck says, move them out temporarily. Chuck, what chance is there out of 100 of once people leave Gaza, of them being allowed back into the land by the Israelis? And I tell you what, I'll make you a deal, Chuck. For whatever people leave, I'll bet you $1 million per head that they don't come back in. And I'll take that bet every day of the week from you. So if you want to make that deal, I could make a lot of money off that bet. So a lot of people here are suggesting that Palestinians be relocated. So what would the feeling be if there were conflict inside of Israel? Let's say that tomorrow morning, every single country in the world decided to gang up on Israel and start bombing and doing what Israel's been doing in Palestine. And then somebody from the world said, hey, why don't we relocate these people to Brooklyn and to Ukraine and to Romania and to southern Germany because these people don't belong here. They need to get out of the way so we don't get harmed. What would you say to that? You'd say, go F yourself, dude. I'm not going anywhere. This is where I live. This is my identity, right? It's no different for Palestinians. The arrogance of not seeing it the same way is the problem. That's the whole problem with all of this. It's the arrogance and hubris of the Israeli government and the people that support the excesses of the Zionist movement that push these policies that are horrible, that end up causing more trouble than good and make sure there's never going to be peace. That's where it comes from. So when you say relocate Palestinians to Saudi Arabia and Iran, do you realize Iran is not an Arab nation? They're Persian. This is part of the ignorance of the people involved here. They don't even understand the geopolitics and the history and even the makeup of people ethnically or religiously. They just don't know. They just want people gone. That makes my point. Somebody says it's not arrogant, call it what it is. Listen, if you call it for somebody else, it should be equally callable for you. And what would you say to somebody that says all the Jews in the Middle East need to leave? They're a problem. You would say that's crazy. How can you possibly say that's anti-Semitic, right? You're calling for the Arab Palestinians to leave a territory because you want to take it over. Well, guess what? Neither fly in my book. Now, I'm trying to be objective as an outsider. You're being partisan, saying that under one set of circumstances, it's okay because it's what you want. But if someone else were doing it to you, you would call it anti-Semitic and outcry, right? I call that a double standard. I also say that that makes you a bad person because you don't care for others. You care about yourself. Right? And that's selfish, self-serving, and I don't like that attitude. I think it's a shitty attitude. Now, you may feel perfectly okay in embodying that attitude, and you can, but I think that makes you someone worthy of condemnation, which we're seeing now. This is the whole point of all this, is that people now are understanding this behavior that we're seeing on the front end, which are the bombs coming down, the rubble, the soldiers shooting people, all the things that are being done. And they wonder, what's this all about? Why is this being a negative? Oh, I get it. These people think they're the chosen people. They think they're better than everybody and that they deserve whatever they want. They can act with impunity. They tell the Americans, who are giving them all the money and stuff to do this with, to go fuck themselves when they try to make a recommendation of not to go in and mass murder refugees. So that just tells me that the leadership does not care about anything other than what they want. Now, what did the guy do in World War II? He went ahead and did whatever hell he wanted to for his people, regardless of the harm it caused others. That's a mindset. That's a mindset that lacks empathy, that lacks concern for others, that's selfish, self-centered, arrogant, an idea of superiority. That is a problem. And it's so strangely ironic that the grandparents of those currently making these decisions to push these policies that are so horrendous and are so shocking to most of us were the very same mentality that pushed the policies against their grandparents. Now, obviously, the circumstances are a little different. There are not these railways and camps and all this stuff like that. But there are refugees and people that are being mistreated and people that are looked down upon and they're being murdered for no reason other than the fact that they're not the group that's doing the murdering. They're looked at as a problem. And so the solution is to push them out or kill them or both. That's what's happening. And I can say that as an observer. And if this were happening by Arabs to Jews, I would criticize the Arabs for doing it to Jews. It's not about Jew or Arab. It's about a cruel mindset, a mindset of selfish, self-centered, superior, arrogant, hubris, ethnically cleansing, racism, the whole nine put into one big ball, and it's called Israel. And I know that's harsh, but it's the behavior that leads to the analysis in that regard, not the people in the country who are in the country who just happen to be there because they were born there. And for those who support the furtherance of these ideas and mindset, they're to be criticized right with the people doing it. Now, nobody's perfect. This is not all one side or the other. right? There are some people on the Palestinian side who are very militant, who are very angry, and who are happy to crack back at people and without seeming concern for them. I'm not for that either. Just so you know, I'm not being unfair and saying it's all one or the other. And I hate the fact that individuals were harmed on 10/7, even the soldiers, but in battle, because there's a blockade, military blockade, which is an act of war around Gaza, they have a right to try to push back or defend themselves or try to break free from those circumstances. It's not a war crime to do that. But going after civilians is intentionally. So in that regard, I'm 100% with every single person who supports Israel in condemning that act, those acts. 100%. Just as I'm against the Israelis in seeking revenge for what happened on the 7th, have decided to murder. Let's face it, it's not killing, it's not accidental. It's purposeful murder and starvation and not allowing medical care and damaging hospitals of an entire population of 2.3 million people because they can. They have the power to do it, and they're doing it. And if you want to use the word moral, that word can't be in the same galaxy, not just zip code, with anything related to Israel, the IDF, any of that stuff. It's silly. It's childish. Just own it. Give the Russians credit. They accept what they do. They say, yeah, this is what we're doing. What Israel does is they do it and they claim they're the victim and they have to do it. They're making us do it. That is a crock of shit. I'll address this one more time. Somebody asked me, and they spelled it J-O-O-Z. Why do you hate the J-O-O-Z? I don't hate the J-O-O-Z. I don't even hate anybody. I don't even hate Israel. I don't even hate the people who are the Zionists who are pursuing all these reckless policies. I don't have any hate in my heart. I hate what they're doing. And I wish the people that were doing that were people who could be engaged with to explain, this is not good. Not good not only for what you're doing in terms of its lack of morality, it's not good for you. It's not serving your long-term cause. You're doing more harm to yourselves than the good you think you're doing. It's like when you have a friend and they're beating somebody up and they've already knocked them unconscious, and now they grab a knife and they start hitting them in the thighs and the leg and they cut their ear off and all this other crazy shit. And you're like, dude, stop. Stop. Enough. Enough. And yet Israel keeps going, kicking them in the head. Want to grab their scalp, wants to go find their neighbor, wants to find their parents, wants to find their entire community. That's what Israel's doing. It's on this rabid mission for revenge and land theft. That's it. So no, I don't hate anybody, but I do hate what's going on. And I've done tons of lives and videos about this. I say over and over again, if the tables were turned and this was an Arab state that was carved out of a region that was shared by different people, and it was Jewish people who were pushed aside and made refugees, and then all the things that happened the same way, but it was the other way around, I would criticize the Arab government and the maniacal leadership that's pushing for their side at the expense of another, which in that case would be Jews. Now, if you think that's unfair or somehow one-sided, how can that be the case? Because I'm telling you that if the parties were switched, I'd be advocating for the oppressed party as I see it, which is, in this case, would be Jewish people. It just so happens that in this case, it's Zionist Jews, mostly Ashkenazi from Europe, who are the vast majority. We didn't finish that conversation, but a very small minority are indigenous to the region, even going back 3,000 years ago. Most of the people who live in Israel who are Jewish as a homeland come from places like America and Poland and Lithuania and Latvia and Ukraine and Romania, etc., 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 etc. So it's mostly a European settler colonial project as admitted by the founders. If you go back and read the language of people like Herzl, Chaim Weizmann, and even David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, they said these things, they put it in writing. You just got to go back and read. Now, there are a lot of people that like to believe the fairy tales without reading the specifics, but when you bring evidence of what the first prime minister said, he said, this is their land. We are taking their land from them. It's natural they will resist. I could just go to Google and type in quotes, David Ben-Gurion, Palestine. Just do that, and you'll see them. You'll be like, damn, this was a settler colonial project. And that's what it's been ever since. And this is just another chapter, another ugly part of the book that Israel's choosing to go out, albeit it's like one of the most violent chapters in the history of this thing. And I understand if you're angry about 10:7. I think Israel has every right to be angry. But again, when you're occupying and blockading somebody and they dare to fight back, what do you expect? I mean, imagine right now if somebody came and took your house, shoved you in the basement, periodically smacked you in the head with a baseball bat, and told you to be grateful for having that little third of the basement, and then every so often took another 5 feet, moving you back to you had a little space in the back of the basement with nothing left to have. And periodically, when you tried to push back and get out of the basement, they beat the shit out of you. Would you be perfectly hunky-dory with that? And would you feel that you had no reason to try to fight out of that circumstance? Of course not. You'd be like, dude, this is crazy. And then the person up in the kitchen is saying to the world, I'm the victim. This terrible person in my basement is trying to fight me back. How dare these people be violent? That's what's going on. And yet somehow people from Israel don't see it that way. They see it as they're in the kitchen upstairs having a good old time, partying, eating great food, while they throw a scrap once in a while to the miserable basement. Don't anybody leave. There's sickness and death, and they beat the shit out of them sometimes, even kill them because they can. And they think, well, everything's fine. Well, it was peaceful on 10/6. How come these people in the bottom room of the basement who's had more and more taken, why are they violent? Why aren't they more peaceful? There you go. So when you think about this from that perspective, which I know is hard to do if you're a Zionist, because you're selfish and you're self-centered and you only see things one way. And I know that because people who have been brought up in Zionist households who break from it then criticize it relentlessly because they realize they were duped. They were told stories that weren't true, that favored one side over the other, that create selfish, self-centered, arrogant behavior that are harmful, and it's no way to be towards another. That's what you'll hear over and over again from those who are against or anti-Zionist Jewish people. They don't think it's right. They're happy to have Jewish people be protected from harm. I think any sane human being would want that. But the way in which Israel conducts itself to maintain that is unacceptable, even to the most basic standards of morality. And if you can't see that, you're not looking at it objectively. You can't look at it objectively. I've talked to people, this in my personal life, long ago, before any of this happened, before I got online. And I would have conversations with people who are just, they have a blind devotion and loyalty to Israel. That's just, you can't even, there's no conversation that's rational. It's an irrational loyalty. It's like somebody from the United States defending everything that our country does because we're America and they love America and they think it's the greatest country in the world, and there's no conversation to be had. And as long as what we do benefits America, go F yourself. Deal with it. If you don't like it, leave. There are plenty of people like that. And I would say that makes somebody a selfish, close-minded jerk. But you may like that way of thinking. But here's what I would guarantee you. When you're on the losing end of somebody looking at you like that, you're not loving it so much. Just like happened in World War II. I'm sure that your grandparents were not loving it so much and didn't understand how somebody else could think that way about them and horribly mistreat them because they just didn't want to deal with them. And that's what Israel does to Palestinians. Horribly mistreats them, looks at them as lower life forms, thinks they should just leave, as many have said here in the live today. Why don't they just leave? Why don't they just go to Iran? Why don't they go to Syria? Why don't they just leave? Just go to some other Arab country. Abby Martin did interviews in Jerusalem. She went there with a mic and a camera and just talked to people in the streets. And she said, what do you think about what's going on with the Palestinian people? And they would say some of the most horrendous things, much like it's been parroted here in the comments, that said that Arab countries should take them. They should go away. We don't need to kill them. They should just go away. Other people said they should be killed. We should kill all of them, is what they said. These are average Israelis. Younger, older, just talking about what they feel. And if you don't look at that and be critical, there's no helping you. Because if somebody were saying that about your people, which others have before, you condemn it as anti-Semite, as an anti-Semitic person, as you should. But somehow when you look down on Palestinians and want them gone because they're sort of a pesky people on your side, pesky thorn in your side, you think it's justified because there's a threat to your security, right? So that's what I call a double standard. You're using a double standard. Yes, I've heard of Jared Kushner. He talked today about a lot of potentially great beachfront property being available in Gaza that people should relocate. How do I feel about Colin Kaepernick? No all caps, by the way, if you don't mind. I support anybody's right to protest. I think when Colin Kaepernick took a knee and others did in the NFL, they had every right to. I think the fact that Trump criticized them was absurd. In fact, criticism and protest is the highest form of patriotism. If you think something in your country is not right, you have every right to protest it. It's freedom of speech. I 100% support Colin Kaepernick. I know we got a lot of criticism, people who like to go to NFL games and have their peaceful life undisturbed by anybody who wants to tell them about unpleasant realities. Just like in Israel, they don't like protesters. The Netanyahu government's been beating the living crap out of people, especially if you go to any city in Israel. If you're someone who's an anti-Zionist Jew, you get the crap beaten out of you. I got video after video of the police in places where people who do protest against Israel's actions in the West Bank and in Gaza, and they get the crap beaten out of them. I see people spitting on Christians who are non-Jews. If you're not Jewish inside of Israel and you're supposed to have rights under the law, which you do, you have in terms of written, you have the same rights, it's equal rights. Go talk to 100 different people of Arab descent in Israel and have no consequences, like give them put them on a mask, let them anonymously share their life. And yes, are there a few exceptions of people who make it through the system and get to places? Yeah, that happens. Like in America, it happens too. We have some people who are generals. We have the former president in our country was half black, half white. He made it to the highest office of someone of color. And we have a general, we have a Secretary of Defense right now who happens to be black, African American, named Lloyd Austin. He rose to a high level of power. We had Colin Powell, who was also Secretary of State at one point. People do make it into positions inside of society. That doesn't mean that it's an equal playing field for all people. And we have a lot of that in our country to sort out. And Israel has a ton of it in its country. It has 2 million Arab residents, and all 2 million are not looked at equally. People will say they are, but they know they're not. And they bring in people from the West Bank and from Gaza to do the dirty work. Palestinians are looked like as the subhuman Mexicans for Israelis. And I'm not trying to use that as a term to disparage Mexican people. I'm just saying in America, a lot of people do lawn care and other services happen to be of Hispanic descent. And people from Palestine are allowed to do the dirty work for the superior people in Israel. So it's all about looking down on others. And that's the problem with this whole thing. It's the mindset. And it's not, when people say they want to end the Zionist project, they don't want to hurt the Jewish people. What they want is to take that infection, that mindset, the thing that has just absolutely got people doing fucked up stuff, and get rid of that. It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or something like that. You got these crazy maniacs like Smotrich and Ben Gvir and Netanyahu and others who just don't give a shit and will do whatever they want to do to anybody whenever they want, and they have no concern for anything but themselves. That is called a sociopath. And the leadership of Israel is sociopathic. And many of those who support the more rigorous tenets of Zionism are sociopathic. And it needs to be stopped. The world would be a much more peaceful place if that mindset, and it's not unique to Israel, let's be clear, but Israel is a shining example of it. And so it's not about harming the people. Ben Shapiro does a great job of doing this. He says, well, if you're against Israel, you want to unalive the Jewish people. You want to put us in the sea. Nope, not going to happen, Ben. Not going to be a part of it. What should happen, though, is the political mindset and structure that pushes these insane policies and these insane arrangements where people are basically, aren't even taken into consideration. That needs to go. And when that goes, a lot of things will improve. And people did live in the land, Arabs and Jews, for a lengthy period of time, and it wasn't World War I, II, or III. It wasn't perfect, especially as the population of Jewish people increased dramatically over the course of 3 decades, especially the last third of that. But that's expected. That happens in terms of human culture. But it wasn't all-out war until Israel was formed arbitrarily, and then the Zionist mindset of settler colonialism was imposed upon and taken further towards another people for no reason, no fault of their own, except for somebody wanted something for themselves. And so they just took it. They got others to approve it. Hey, they approved it. They got them to approve it. They greased the skids. And now you have a situation where there's no peace because the other people who are dispossessed won't give up. I can't blame them for that. Can you blame anybody? If you blame the Palestinians for resisting the military occupation of Israel, by Israel, and if you blame the people in Gaza from lashing out of their occupation, or you want to call it blockade, if you want to call it occupy, because I know Israel did dismantle settlements. They didn't give anything. They relinquished stolen property in 2005. This idea that they gave Gaza to them and all we got was rocket fire, that's a bullshit story. But how can you blame them for wanting to push back against their circumstances? If you were under those circumstances, what would you do? If you were given no chance for peaceful resolution, you broke from the other part of your political establishment because they wouldn't do shit except deal with it. So you decided you're going to fight because it's all you got left. And you don't want to fight. You'd rather just have hummus and pita bread and watch the water come in off the ocean, go to a nice dinner with your family, have a good life. But life isn't that good for them. Half the people are unemployed. Israel controls the movement of all the people in and out. They have a registry, for God's sakes, of every single human being that's born there. I mean, think of that for a second. Think if Israelis were living under the control of Palestinians. Would they like that? And anytime anybody who was more militant in Israel decided to fight back, they absolutely just crushed your people. And not the people who did the fighting, but everybody else as sort of collective punishment, which we're seeing the greatest example of right now. This has been going on for 75 years. It was really bad before 1967. It just got way worse with all the settlements being built. It was like putting your finger in the wound of somebody you've already, punched in the face and stabbed 10 times. And now you're sticking your finger in their infected wound. You won't give them medical care. It's just, this is what Israel does. And if you're against the pushback that happened on the 7th, which is understandable, you look at it as a horrendous day, I get it. But if you don't support the actions on 10/7, if you're against them, if you're calling them out for being horrific, violent thugs, then you don't support the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Because you can't have the two in the same sentence. If you have a people that are being ruthlessly oppressed and made miserable by another because they have the power, and you have people that push back against that power dynamic, and you don't condemn one, you can't condemn the other. I don't condemn either. I don't condemn the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, of course not, because they were under horrendous treatment by the Germans. And I don't condemn the 10/7 attack. I do condemn the aspects where civilians were hurt. Somebody says, who attacked Israel? What happened was a country who maintained a warlike footing by blockading another enclave of people who were refugees from a previous 2-generation displacement and murder by a thuggish Zionist settler colonial land project, decided finally, after decades of mistreatment and horribly being murdered and having their economies controlled and everything inside being completely controlled, decided to try to fight back. It's not about attacking Israel out of the blue. This idea that Israel is this innocent nation that was peaceful and on 10/6 everything was hunky-dory, and then all of a sudden 10/7, these people just decided to attack because they're brutal. You don't get to do that. If you're the occupying power or if you're the blockading power and somebody fights your blockade, they're doing something as a resistance effort to your actions. You can't claim, oh my gosh, the people in the basement that I threw down there and took their house from, they decided to throw a mop at me up the stairs. How dare they? Now I'm going to flood the basement and beat the shit out of their children. No. You have the upper hand in terms of the power dynamic. You should behave responsibly vis-a-vis how you're using that. Not cry if somebody decides to fight back. Now, I understand you're angry because of what happened to your people. That's fair. And you want to try to get back at those who did it. I think that's understandable. I'm not to say it's fair, because Israel's been killing way more Palestinians over the decades than the number of Israelis who have been killed by all sorts of different activities. It's not even close. So on the one hand, if you come in with a military soldier and you snipe somebody from 300 feet away who's a civilian, and you come in and you take 15 people off under administrative detention, which are effectively hostages, and you do that over and over again for 15, 20, 30, 40 years, such that you kill like 26,000 people over the time, and in one day somebody comes in and unalives 1,200 people, it's still not close. It's impactful. It's sudden. It's unexpected. But it shouldn't be outside the realm of, understanding it within the greater context. If you were living that way, would you just sit back and take it? And if you would, I think less of you. I admire the people in the Warsaw Ghetto who decided they weren't going to take it. They were going to risk their lives to fight back, because what was their choice? Just wait to be exterminated? What are the people in Gaza supposed to do? Just wait and endure the constant onslaught of Israel, the further immiseration of their people, watching the other part of their government sell out and work with the Israelis while the leaders get rich and the people suffer and more land gets taken? What would you do? I'm just trying to think of both sides. I understand wanting security, but if you want security, you have to give somebody a chance to have some autonomy. Otherwise, you have no expectation of security. You can't keep a boot on somebody's neck and when they smack your side of your leg, be shocked they did it. That's an asinine thing to say, to have expectations of that. I wouldn't expect that of you if you were under that boot. Why should you expect it of them? Right? So I think these are fair things to point out. If you disagree, let's come up and talk about it. I'd love to have a conversation with somebody. You know, anybody can call somebody names and say you're a moron, you don't know what you're talking about. But let's go point by point. Let's go back to 1947 and let's talk about what happened and all the changes that occurred to whom and go from there. I don't want to go back to the land of David and the kingdom of David and 3,000 years ago and all that bullshit, because that wasn't in place in 1922 and 1943 and 1947. It was a completely different set of circumstances that had evolved. So that is how I feel about it. I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm saying that that's my point of view. And I think a lot of people share that point of view, and more people who are learning about this now that this happened on October 7th. It's horrible that happened. Nobody's for violence. They shouldn't be. I'm against violence because I served in a war. I've seen violence literally 10 feet away. I've seen all the harm that it does. You know, the smells, that's what stays with me the most, is the smell of what combat was. It was, you know, every time I smell something that takes me back there, it's like, boom, I'm right back on the ground there. It's crazy. But you can't do something to somebody indefinitely and expect them to behave politely. That's the problem. And so as long as Israel maintains this attitude of, we're going to do what we want because our security is more important and nothing else matters, the violence will continue. It's a guarantee. It's a guarantee. It's not a possibility. It's a guarantee. And if you kill every single fighter that participated in that day, supported them that day, whomever you want, maybe the administrative people who provided the logistics or whatever you want to do, kill them all. Kill every Palestinian. There's going to be resistance to your actions because people don't like the shit you're doing. You get it? It's not about them hating you as people. It's about them hating the things you do to them and the circumstances under which they find themselves with seemingly no way out from under it other than to try to do something that they can do, which is to fight. And to say that they siphon money off that could otherwise feed the people or make life better for building tunnels and buying weapons or building rockets or whatever. Every nation, Israel takes some money from its budget, mostly from the United States, but the United States provisions almost $1 trillion a year that could help the country. But it doesn't. It goes to blowing shit up and killing people. And every country or every group has a right to decide how they want to divvy up their proceeds or the things they bring in from others to do the things that are important to them, both near term and long term. And if they believe collectively that the struggle they're in is more important long term, and they're willing to sacrifice resources and even their very lives toward a broader cause, who are we to tell them they shouldn't do it? Who are we to tell them who to govern themselves? Who are we to tell them what religion to follow, what social practices, or even how they defend themselves? Right? I think this is all fair. So if you disagree with me, come on up to the guest queue. I'd love to have your point of view. I will be polite to you. I promise. I'm always polite to everybody. All I ask is you come up and we talk about the issues. Some of the guests I've had recently start talking about my mother. Any of those personal attacks, ways of shifting, of deflecting from the actual substance of the conversation. So if you want to have a substantive conversation, and somebody says they can't hear me, everybody else in the audience can hear me, so you may want to try leaving the live and coming back. But the bottom line is, I don't think that it's not unthinkable. Even the head of the UN said this when it first happened, Antonio Guterres, who's not a mean guy. He's a nice man. And he's doing the best he can with a difficult situation. You know, he said that it was horrible what happened on 10/7, And he used the word but, which is I think is appropriate. He said, but we all know it didn't happen in a vacuum. And so it's understandable. Again, you can't claim, foul of another person you've been beating all day. I mean, imagine in a basketball game, if you're guarding somebody and you bring in a billy club off the street and you start beating them in the back of the head and shoving it in their gut, and the person turns around with an elbow finally after 6 months of you doing this and elbows you in the chin, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this person hit me. You can't do that. And that's what Israel is doing. Has been for a long time. And then to play the victim after all that, give me a break. Now, for every hostage that was taken, or someone who was unalived who was a civilian, all that, I'm against all that. Any kind-hearted person would say that. If you're angry about the hostages not being returned, I've heard this said over and over again. Why doesn't Hamas just lay down their arms, return the hostages, and everything will be just fine? Well, first of all, no, it won't. The status quo has gotten worse and worse, and the reason why this even happened was because there's no end in sight. Like, there's no light at the end of the tunnel for some people, so you have to try to do something, anything to change things up. I understand that. But there are thousands of Palestinians that are essentially hostages that sit and rot in Israeli jails for nothing more than looking the wrong way at an IDF soldier one time, or being caught up in a raid for knowing the cousin who may have thrown a rock, or they thought through a rock and they just scoop them up and they stick them in jail and they say, you're detained. Well, what did I do? No charges. You're just administratively detained. That's a hostage. If there are thousands of people under those circumstances and somebody goes into your country and grabs several hundred people to try to use as leverage to get some of those hostages back, that's what we call an exchange of hostages, or a prisoner exchange. And that's not unheard of. I'm sad that people who got taken are having to deal with the hardship of living wherever they are, or the whole traumatic experience and all that. But what about the people who are sitting in Israeli jails? Do you care about them? Or are they just all terrorists, as the government tells you? No, they're not. These are 12, 13, 14-year-old kids. Wrong place, wrong time, stuck in jail, 4 years. By the way, horribly mistreated, by the way. Denigrated. Left in horribly uncomfortable situations, fed rotten, moldy food. I did a whole video about this, about how the Israelis treat Palestinian prisoners. It's horrific. And they unfortunately have sexually assaulted them, left, right, and center, for decades. And if you look at the map of Israel, there are more sex offenders per square kilometer than any other place in anywhere, as far as I know, in the world. Maybe that's not right, but from what I can tell, it is. I don't know what it is about that society where these perverted things run through people's heads, but they've done horrible things to Palestinians. And then they have the audacity to claim that on 10/7, this SA thing was used systematically to terrorize Israelis. Are you kidding me? That's been used as a tool by Israel. Talk about projection. That's been done to Palestinians as a regular course of action for as long as this has been going on. And then you have the audacity to say that somehow these people are barbaric. Their religion teaches them they can't even do that. They have to be accepting of other religions. They have to treat women and children and the elderly with respect and care. They can't be taken out. They can't be dealt with that way. Now, I can't say for sure that there wasn't some whack job who didn't follow the code, but the more we've learned about this, and this may really anger you if you're pro-Israel, and it's okay if it does. I've had people tell me that because I say what I'm about to say, that I should be anally raped. Some guy named Menachem Begin came on, Menachem Begel came on and said that shit. That's the difference between myself and a Zionist. I may disagree with you to the core of my being, but I will never personally attack you or wish harm on you. Because in the end, we're all just people, and we have good in us and we have bad in us. But getting back to the point of what happened on 10/7, we've heard tons of allegations of really horrific things that happened. We're talking, burnings and assaults, mutilations, all this stuff, playing catch back and forth with body, all that stuff. The point we have is this. Nobody can say for sure without, knowing for sure. I don't have omniscient cognition. I don't know for sure. So I can't say it didn't happen, because that would be unfair. But in terms of corroboratory evidence, everyone seems to say it's a no-brainer. Like, of course, everyone knows that happened. Of course. Well, it was spoken that it happened. It's been repeated that it happened. But the evidence to say that it happened has been not non-existent, and those stories that have been written or reported on have been refuted for being completely false. And when you have example after example after example after example of this overstatement of atrocities, this atrocity propaganda to try to vilify this group of people that, quite frankly, are violent, right? They're fighters. But to try to make them look like the worst people on earth, which, by the way, Frank Luntz, the consultant to the Republican Party, who's a linguistics specialist, they asked him before, what is the number one way to get people against the H group to support the actions of what we're doing? They said, accuse them of sexual violence, because that's what outrages people the most. They find that just beyond unacceptable. So that's what Israel did. They went on this campaign saying that all they did was use it as a term of mass terror. It's in this UN report. Well, the UN report proves it. Guess what the UN report is based upon? Israeli testimony. Now, how far can we trust Israeli officials? Well, let's go to others. Don't listen to me. I'm just some guy. Who am I? Just some guy on the internet. Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, who served as the chief of staff to former Secretary of State Colin Powell in the Bush administration from 2000 to 2006, dealt directly with Israeli officials on the regular. And there's a taped interview of him saying, and these are his words, not mine, I'm paraphrasing, you cannot trust a single word that comes out of the mouth of an Israeli official. They lie. They lie. They are inveterate liars. They lie. I did a video about this. I put it on there. Now listen, this is somebody who dealt directly with the officials, not just the things that I've observed through the media as just a third party. So it's very difficult when somebody says, trust me, dude, I got the evidence, and they've been lying through their teeth for decades about everything under the sun. And every time you find out they're lying, they just kind of shake their heads like, oh, wah, wah, wah. This is why it's hard to trust when somebody says, it happened, dude, trust me. So if there was evidence of this happening, first of all, as Bassem Youssef said on the PBD podcast, people who terrorize people like to show examples of it. Look what ISIS did, or Daesh, or whatever you want to call them. They would put out those really disgusting videos of people, being inside of cages and drowned, or whatever the hell they did. All that, all the stuff they did, which was horrific, right? They put it out there because they want to terrorize the enemy. But none of that was on the body cameras. We've seen the body camera footage, and yes, there were some things done towards civilians. I saw some horrible things done in terms of shootings, but none of that other stuff. And so where's the evidence of that? Did it just not get caught on camera? That's possible, right? So the very witnesses who have claimed they saw this, that, and the other, that's been rebuked or debunked. The New York Times author, who was a former IDF soldier who went to work for the New York Times, was writing pro-Israeli pieces, and she wrote one about this whole thing saying there was all this evidence that turned out to be totally false. She got fired. We have witnesses from family members who said our daughter was not involved in that. That didn't happen to our daughter when the Israelis claimed she had been assaulted. So the question is, when we hear all that, what is one to do in the face of that? The compilation video that was shown to a select group of journalists, including Elon Musk and others who have seen it. Yeah, they said it was awful. Seeing people hurt, innocent civilians hurt, which I think is a war crime, and they should be punished for that. I agree. But the evidence in that report did not contain anything that would indicate what the other allegations have been in terms of, live removal of this, the mutilation part, the essaying, all that stuff that's been claimed that's kind of considered an afterthought now. There's no evidence of it. So I'm not saying it didn't happen, because that would be unfair and irresponsible. But yeah, thanks. I got to do that. Thank you for reminding me. But in the same breath, it would also be irresponsible to take someone's word for it who lies for a living. And if you think that's overly harsh towards Israel, trust me, it is based on a litany of examples for many decades that I've observed. Because Israel can't defend what it does, so it has to lie about what it does. They do bad things. And when you do bad things constantly, you have to try to find a way to cover up your bad work. And that's what Israel does. It tries to find any which way it can. I mean, it makes the public statement that it goes out of its way to avoid civilian casualties. That's what they say all the time, that they're a moral army. They drop leaflets, all this stuff like that. No, they don't. Have they ever done it? Yeah, they've done it here and there. But do they do it as a standard practice? No way. All right, we've had some guests have been waiting. I've gone on for over an hour here. Let me talk. Let me let James Rossi come up. I apologize for the delay for those. Yeah. Again, issues, facts, not personal stuff, please. Hello, James. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. Let me just get my camera on if I can get it on.
Sure.
That's the one. Hey, Chip, how are you?
I always get hot under the collar when I start talking about this because it's so frustrating that this shit goes on. I can't believe it keeps going on for year after year after year.
Yeah, I've done a few. I don't know if you've looked at my TikTok, but I've done quite a few videos that have gone quite in depth into what you're talking about and a few other things. And I like digging up information. So I will go and research something, dig it up, and then put it out there, which is quite shocking. I think one of the biggest things that stunned, even shocked me, was I was looking at how much money the US had given to Israel in the form of aid, which is basically for weapons. And I came across a figure of 18 billion. But luckily, Google being Google, it also put me up the UK government webpage, which told me that 3.6 billion of UK taxpayers' money had been given in weapons aid. Yeah. That's actually gone up. I've re-looked at it. It's nearly double that now. But when you were talking about Hamas, one of the things that I've been trying to dig up more information on, and I've come across bits and pieces, but it's a bit sketchy, is that initially there was the PLO with Yasser Arafat, and there was the peace talks. I can't remember the name of the Israeli prime minister at the time, the one that was assassinated.
Yitzhak Rabin.
Yeah, that's him. Right. So you had him and Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin. They were very close to coming to a two-state solution and a peace deal. Yep. Yitzhak Rabin, we all know, was assassinated by Zionist far right, and Yasser Arafat died of a mysterious illness not too long afterwards. So I'd probably say Yasser Arafat, in my opinion, I can't say for definite, but in my opinion, he's probably bumped off because he was a big problem. But the thing that I'm starting to sort of hear and sort of find is that there's a possibility, and I don't want to say it as a fact because I haven't got the full information on it, but there's a possibility that what's it called? Mossad. Sorry, I do apologise. I just slipped out of my head for a minute. But Mossad and the CIA helped fund initially the Hamas movement because they didn't want peace. Because, like what you're talking about they basically would like, and I believe it to be true after seeing what's gone on, to remove Palestinian Arabs from the land completely. Now, obviously, Yasser Arafat was a big problem, and so was the Israeli prime minister at the time, or president at the time. So you got rid of them, you get your two secret services together, CIA and Mossad, start Hamas, and bang, you've got a terrorist organisation, and off you go. And here we are now. And it wouldn't be far from the truth. We've seen, Mossad interfere in certain things, around the world. We've seen, just recently, French intelligence were in Serbia, causing a bit of trouble there. I work with Warren Thornton and do a bit of a news show with him. So we talk a lot about this stuff on the news. We also know that, the American administration and I think the French administration as well were involved in originally getting rid of the democratically elected Ukrainian government and replacing them with who we've got there now, the president of Ukraine now, Vladimir Zelensky. So, to say that Mossad or CIA could be involved in this would not be too far from the realms of reality, really. What do you think?
Well, I think they have a hand in a lot of things. I would take issue with one thing that you said respectfully. I don't call Hamas a terrorist group. I refer to them as a resistance group that has employed tactics, especially on October 7th, that involved the harming of civilians to the extent it was war crimes. But Hamas is also a government. Remember that the majority of people that are in Hamas political movement are not fighters. They've done a lot of good things inside of Gaza to help civilians and improve lives. A lot of charitable work, which goes completely without conversation. And I'm not saying that that justifies what happened on October 7th in terms of civilians, but it's just part of the reality. And I think too often that term is thrown around as if everything to do with that group is just, somehow hateful, which it's not. Now, do they do other things in terms of how they maintain order in Gaza that I don't agree with, that I'm sure some people who didn't vote for them and even many who did don't like, and that's fair criticism. But what they did in 10/7 and what they did in terms of firing rockets, I don't look at firing rockets into Israel as terror. And no more than if you're Israeli and you're dropping bombs on Gaza, you can't call that terror. The difference is the weight and the payload.
Yeah.
That's it. So you
Well,
can't
on the
either
Hamas,
neither are terror or they both are. You got to be consistent.
no, but I mean, on the Hamas thing, I think when I said that, I'm going with the Western sort of per se thing, because in the UK we've got a big problem at the moment. If you turn around and say that you support what Hamas are doing, or if you turn around and say that you don't view them as terrorists, there's a very real chance that you'll be arrested. And I'm pretty certain, honestly, Warren got arrested a little while back. That was for talking about something to do with Ukraine. We've had a few other people been arrested. So I kind of try to word things in a way that doesn't get me arrested, essentially. I know we shouldn't have to do that. It's like a lot of people were saying unalive for a long time because accounts were getting shut down and people were getting pulled up because they're clamping down. The Prime Minister we've got at the moment has publicly come out and said, that if you're taking part in a peaceful Palestinian protest, then essentially, you're far right or far left and you're an extremist. And he wants to bring laws in to have you arrested. So, I've done a lot of work prior to this, working within the union world, within the realms of my employment. So I've kind of got a bit of experience of how to word things in a certain way and what to be careful saying, what not to be careful saying on legal perspective of getting potentially the sack from work. But now I'm also having to look at what I say and what I do as to whether or not I'm going to get arrested. So, sometimes I'll say something that's a fact, but I'll say it as my opinion, because then I'm not saying it's a fact, because that could get me stitched up as well. It's getting a bit really sort of tight over here with the laws, and the government's really trying to clamp down on anyone speaking out and speaking up for Palestine and speaking up against the British government.
Yeah, I think that's got to be very frustrating. I mean, one of the key sort of benefits of living in the United States, at least for now, is that we do have some form of freedom of speech, although the social media landscape has been shifting dramatically recently. And they're trying to change it even more so with the acquisition of TikTok, potentially, if it's taken over by a group of American Israeli, pro-Israel investors. But, I don't know why in other countries they arrest people, unless you're saying something really hateful. Like, I want all of XYZ group to be, specific with specific information. I want everybody from our neighborhood right now to go out tomorrow night and do X, Y, and Z to these people. Other than that, which is a direction of violence. I can't believe that the government doesn't allow people to share their personal opinions.
I'll tell you why, Chip. Because the government's stance on Hamas is that legally, in their opinion and the government's opinion, and the opposition for that matter, pretty much most politicians, is that Hamas are a terrorist organisation. So if I was to turn around and say, as far as I'm concerned, they're freedom fighters, I support them completely, and, I understand what they're doing, and I was to say that and say, this is what I really believe, I could get arrested for that. I'm supporting a terrorist organisation.
That's really stupid. I mean, the American colonists who were under British occupation and colonization in 1775, guess what the British called them when they fought back unconventionally?
I know, they called them terrorists.
Exactly. So this whole silly thing, it's all about one's perspective. I'm sure the Americans who were fighting in the British didn't think of themselves as terrorists. They wanted freedom from what the British wanted. The H group doesn't want to do what it's doing right now. It would rather peacefully go about its day and live their lives. But they're left in an untenable situation, and therefore they use what's at their disposal, which isn't much, to do what they can to try to resist. So you can call it what you want. I mean, Miko Peled, who's a son of an Israeli general, he gives talks all the time. He says that the IDF is the most well-funded, well-trained terrorist organization on the planet.
I would agree with that.
So I think we got the language reversed. We have a small group of unfunded, not very well-equipped militants who are trying to fight oppression. and we have a bunch of overbearing Zionists who are well funded and commit acts of atrocity. They commit atrocities on the regular and get away with it.
Well, there was a big thing that they were trying to clamp down, saying that you couldn't, speak out against Zionists because that was anti-Semitic. I don't believe that to be correct, and I did a video on that because you don't actually have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. You could be a Christian. There are lots of Christian Zionists. You could be an atheist. You don't have to have a religion at all to be a Zionist. Zionism, in my opinion, is a very, very dangerous thing. And I think it was 1975 or 76. I can't remember. I could be slightly wrong with the date, but I know it was the mid to late 70s.
It was 75.
Okay, 75 was classified by the UN as a racist organisation, and that was up until the late 80s. I think 87 or 88. I know I'm thereabouts, yeah. But it should be reclassified as racist. It should fall under the same thing as in not in Nazi Germany, as in Germany, that if you fly the swastika or you say you're a Nazi, you get arrested and go to prison. And I know that seems a bit extreme, but we've seen how dangerous Zionism is. And I think it is very dangerous. And I don't think it's just dangerous for the Palestinians. It's severe racism, and it's fanatical, extreme racism. And that is dangerous. And we've seen that with fanatical racism from, obviously, the Nazis in Germany, and how dangerous that was and what that led to. And what is the potential, what's next? Once they've got the greater Israel of all of Palestine, I remember one of the politicians in Israel giving a speech, I think it was back in November, and he's got a map. And part of that map of the greater Israel covers Lebanon, covers Syria, covers Saudi Arabia. How far do they want to go? This is the question.
Well, don't forget, it's most of Iraq too, including Kuwait.
Yeah, Iraq as well. Yeah. So for me, it's like for them, Greater Israel and occupying all these other countries and the whole of Palestine is no different to Germany wanting Labour's land in the east.
Yeah, it's an expansionist mindset. They always want to point to Vladimir Putin as being this maniacal dictator who wants to take over Europe, but it's the Israelis that are further encroaching into people's territory, have been for decades, yeah. And there's seemingly no end to it. And this is just another chapter, but it's on steroids. So, the Biden administration talks a good game in public. They say things that Netanyahu has to stop, but there's no repercussions. Yeah. There's no accountability. And any hot air without some sort of accountability or some sort of, consequences is meaningless.
Well, to be honest, I think there's three things going on here. The American government, much the same as the British government, because the British government is funded by Friends of Israel. This is the Conservative Party, 80%.
James, I'm sorry to interrupt you, just 1 second. This is an administrative point. Somebody who had a Hebrew name just tried to come up. I didn't kick you out. I tried to bring you up, and you disappeared. So if you're still listening and you want to come up and speak, come on back in and re-request. Sometimes you have to leave TikTok, come back into TikTok, and then come back up and then ask to fix that problem. But anyway, all voices are welcome here. I look forward to having you here if you want to come up. Please continue, James. I apologize.
So 80% of the Conservative Party is funded by Friends of Israel, which is something similar to AIPAC in America. And 40% now or more of the Labour Party are funded. So the politicians have that vested interest, which is the Zionist side of it. The other thing you've got to think about is Israel's own Zionist government and regime. They want the greater Israel. They've got this fanatical belief that it's their land, they're entitled to it, going back thousands of years, and that everybody else is there to serve them. And then you've got the last part of it, which is the Western leaders basically greedy eyes opening up and thinking, well, hang on a minute, we're going to make a lot of money here through Friends of Israel. Plus, there's a shitload of oil and there's a shitload of gas there. And if we build that Ben Gurion Canal, we can elbow out Egypt and we'll control what trade goes through there completely ourselves. And that's there's a big part of it.
Yeah, those things could be. I mean, that project's been on the books for a long time, and to date, it's not been done. It's very expensive, and because of the politics of the region, it's one that most big companies don't want to invest in because they want to have stability to build something like that. So, who knows? As far as the gas fields, it's mostly natural gas. I don't know to what extent this pier that the U.S. is building, this delivery system, is going to be part of a permanent American
I'm
size
not sure if
structure on the coast there. So there are a lot of questions about the future. I mean, all I can do is see what's happening in the present, and that is more and more Palestinians dying, the desire to push them off the land into the desert or to other places, and a very, very close connection between the desires of the Israeli government and what the United States policy is. And my biggest concern is that our nation and our soldiers and our military will get drawn into a conflict that's not even benefiting our country, which none of this is benefiting America. And although I certainly don't want people in Israel to lack security, I don't want to supply them with offensive weapons for them to carry out their whatever desires we're seeing carried out.
Well, the Americans or the British or the French, because they're the main suppliers of weapons to Israel, should not be supplying things like bunker busting bombs for starters. They're illegal to use in civilian populations. I presume one of our governments is giving them white phosphorus. That's illegal to use in civilian populations. So why they're doing that is beyond me, because that's just heinous. All right, you might quietly, want to agree with Israel's plan to ethnically cleanse the area because you've got motives. I know the British Prime Minister, for argument's sake, his father-in-law, he's part of a company. I can't remember the name of it. I think it begins with Z. But it's basically a company that's based. I think it's based in India, but it's under the umbrella of BP. And I know for a fact, and you can Google this, his father-in-law is set to make £1.5 billion out of the exploration for oil. And that's in Israel. He's also got links to eastern Ukraine. If Russia loses the war, he's set to make a huge amount of money there. I mean, I don't know if this is fact, but I was talking to Warren the other day, and he's pretty clued up on Ukraine. I mean, he's very clued up on it. And he reckons there's about $75 trillion of profit to be made out of that war if the West wins it. And that's in Ukraine. So there is a lot of money tied up in this. And I think
$75 trillion? That's not correct. That's not right.
Well, I mean, that was I don't know for definite. I didn't research it, but that was a figure that was quoted to me. I don't know for definite. Maybe that's including war reparations and not war. Yeah, war reparations. Because don't forget all the weapons that have gone to Ukraine. A lot of people don't realize this, but when the West gives weapons to Ukraine, it's not, there you go, it's free. There's a price tag. They've got to pay back somehow.
Those loans will be forgiven. There's no way they're going to ever enforce those loans.
Well, that's technically there's a lot of natural gas there. There's a lot of other natural, minerals there in eastern Ukraine. It's quite a rich area. So I know that a lot of business, Hunter Biden's got quite a lot of business interests there. So it could be a case of, well, we're going to run all the business. We're going to get what we want out of here. If you look at Iraq, that was, I think, what was it? The oil from Iraq for a period of time. Iraq didn't make hardly any money out of the oil because obviously a lot of the equipment that was used and sent, from my understanding, to rebuild the country basically was paid for in oil.
Well, the Western multinationals came in and started producing the oil and then had a royalty sharing agreement with the government, which was not the case before the war started. It was nationalized by the Iraqis, which is always the case. The same thing happened in 1953 in Iran. The Aramco, which was the Anglo-American oil company, which became British Petroleum. They were producing oil in in Iran. And then when Mossadegh came to power, he was going to nationalize, in other words, kick out the Western oil producers and do it internally. And he was overthrown. So anytime that the Western multinational corporations are kept out of the sandbox, so to speak, by a leader, they're targeted for removal in one way or another. And that's the same thing. And that's the same reason why they want Putin out. They want the resources of Russia. They want a compliant lackey who will allow what Yeltsin did, which was the complete, theft. And it's basically like exploitative behavior where they mistreat the workers. They leave behind environmental pollution. They take the natural resources. And when they're done, they just go to the next place. It's like this parasitic, like mosquito type operation where they come in and suck things out of the place. And Putin won't allow it to happen. I was listening to Senator Chris Van Hollen. He was on Democracy Now! Today with Amy Goodman. And he said that, and by the way, there's a bill where they commingled the financial support and military aid to Israel with the aid that's going to be, for Ukraine.
That's
And so
correct.
the 14 billion went along with the 60 billion. It's like it's a $74 billion appropriation. And that's what they do. They say, if you want one, you got to get both. And so Van Hollen did not want to do the additional offensive weaponry for Israel, but he said he didn't want to let this up. Now, I disagree with money going to both. I think the Russians are never going to relinquish that territory. There is no, quote, winning the war against Russia. They have victory well in hand. I know most people don't like to hear that. And we were lied to by our government for a year and a half, 2 years, saying that Ukraine was making all this progress. They weren't. That the spring offensive was going to be big. It wasn't. The territory that Russia has now annexed, they've put minefields in front of it. If you were going to advance your troops and take over the entire country, you wouldn't put defensive minefields in front of your positions to the west towards Kiev. So the Russians are very happy to have what they have. They're moving a little bit more through the south regions towards Odessa, but they're not going to take over all of Ukraine. They don't need it. Why would they want it? Again, getting back to politics, we talked about why doesn't Israel just completely obliterate all of Gaza? Because of the politics. Russia has none of their interests are met by fully taking over the nation state of Ukraine. Their objectives are being met by what they've done and what they're doing in the territories they've secured.
I think the only thing I think you're absolutely correct about Russia's objectives. You're absolutely correct about the fact that we've been completely lied to. The summer and spring offensive was a complete disaster. The casualty lists that the West are trying to say with regards to Ukrainian casualties are ridiculous. I mean, I think we're talking 400,000 or 500,000 Ukrainian dead. But
try 600,000.
Yeah, but I do believe that Odessa will be taken as well. But apart from that, I don't think Russia will go any further. They're just after Odessa. That's the next part. Once they've got that region, like you said, they'll do the same as what they've done everywhere else. They'll minefield it up completely and defend it to the hilt. And anything that comes within that zone will get obliterated.
I couldn't agree more. And there are a lot of people that have the wrong impression. When this whole thing popped off back in, just past the pandemic, everybody in my neighborhood had Ukrainian flags on their porch, and everybody in their little bio on Twitter had Ukrainian flags. And everybody was like all pro-Ukraine. And I think most people, if they had any idea what really goes on inside Ukraine, both just under normal situations, under the economy and the corruption, but if you add in the infiltration of the different military units by the ultra-nationalists, what are otherwise called neo-Yazis, and you look at the way the government runs, it's been a breeding ground for, sort of these extremists, as well as it's been militarized to an extent by NATO, that it's a de facto NATO country. And the U.S. has been prodding and pushing Russia. They have bioweapons labs there, for Christ's sakes. The U.S. has been using Ukraine for its objectives towards Russia for the last couple of decades, up to and including displacing and changing the government forcibly in 2014 to a more pro-Western government. We're not given the full story there. And so it makes it sound as if the Russians, much like the Israelis and others would say that on 10/7, the attack was unprovoked. We all know that wasn't true. The Russian attack in 2022 was not unprovoked. If you study the full context and you understand what happened with 1947 to present with the Palestinian issue, but you look at February of 2022 on the Russian-Ukraine issue, you're missing the backstory.
That's right, you are. And that's because we weren't told the backstory initially. Just quickly on Ukraine, when you're talking about far right and extremists, we're talking about the Azov battalions, essentially, which have now grown. If you look at the Azov battalion flag and the insignias on it, right, those insignias that cross over each other are both Waffen-SS, German, Nazi insignias. And the reason being is because Wagner's roots go all the way back to the Ukrainian SS regiments that were employed and used by the German Nazis in World War II. So
one of the national heroes, you'll see people who are from those groups. There's the Aidar Battalion, the Right Sector, the Azov Battalion. These are all these paramilitary, sort of right-wing, ultra-nationalist Ukrainian neo-Yazi groups. But they basically dedicate their lives to following the mindset of a former collaborator with the Yazis, a guy named Stepan Bandera. And they're really referred to as disciples or Banderites. And what they basically praise is this was a person who collaborated with the Yazis and unalived over 60,000 Ukrainian Jews. This is not a good human being. And this is one of the national heroes after which streets have been named. And people claim that he's a great, this is an ultra-nationalist Ukrainian. And they hate Russians with a passion. That's what people didn't understand is there's no homogeneous country called Ukraine with Ukrainians. It's Western Ukrainians and Eastern Russian speaking Ukrainian citizens that have more of a cultural tie to Russia, and therefore they're hated by the ultranationalists, and that's what instigated the conflict.
That's correct. Yeah, that is exactly what happened. And a lot of people don't realize just how terrible it was for the Eastern Ukrainians under Zelensky's regime, and how they were persecuted. And
Well, under Poroshenko too.
yeah, there was a few, yeah, and there was a few. From what I'm led to believe, there was a few slaughters, basically, or massacres, should I say, not slaughters, massacres, under those two regimes, until the Russians stepped in.
Yeah, and the thing is, if people don't know this, the way this played out was, if you imagine for a second, let's say you're a very strong Democrat and you voted for Joe Biden, and Joe Biden was the president for a couple of years, and he won by a slim majority. And then let's say that China comes in and foments unrest in our country through different types of aid groups and non-governmental organizations, and starts a big protest in DC, and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people are like occupying DC, and they want Biden gone. And yet Biden didn't want to go because he was democratically elected. Then they create a situation where some of the protesters get shot and killed, and they blame it on the Biden administration. And so Biden has to flee the country and a new person takes over. Well, if you're somebody who supported Biden and you know that was bullshit, would you be happy with Trump coming into power knowing that you voted for Biden?
No,
No one
obviously
would.
not. No.
That's what happened to the people living in the east part of Ukraine, the Russian speaking people. The guy they voted for by a very slim majority won, Viktor Yanukovych. And a very similar scheme was kind of devised by the CIA and the State Department to get this guy out of power. They fomented a lot of, there were a lot of anger around the fact that they weren't working directly with the European Union and the World Bank, because Yanukovych went with a Russian offered economic package. And so they wanted to get him out for that reason alone. But he also wasn't friendly enough with the US for what it wanted to accomplish in Ukraine. So in 2014, they hatched a plan. They created that situation using some of those aforementioned neo-Yahtzee types, those really hardliners. And they created this horrible event called the Euromaidan massacre, where 103 people were killed, 22 police officers, 81 civilians. And that's what created the fervor that got Yanukovych out of the country, because they blamed it on the sitting president. And so it was like a rabid mob that was trying to kill the guy because they were under the impression that he had just killed all these civilians and police officers. So anyway, these are all part of the variables. We were never told World One about this. If you watch Ukraine on Fire, which is a documentary by Oliver Stone, you'll see all this outlined. And in fact, there's a recording that was captured where Victoria Nuland, the then Undersecretary of State, was talking to Jeffrey Pyatt, who was the ambassador to Ukraine. And 3 weeks before this happened, they were caught on a phone call talking about who they wanted to replace the sitting president as the interim president in Ukraine.
That's absolutely correct. That is. See, for me, I think democracy is a wonderful thing. And I think democracy used in the right way for the people is something that is really, really brilliant and could really serve the West and the world in the right way. But what I think, and I feel that we've got now more than ever in the Western world, and part of it is due to Zionist influence, is we've got corporate democracy. And it's all about money, it's all about greed, it's all about power, it's all about land grabs, overthrowing governments and wars and proxy war. And if we keep going the way we're going to end up with a big war between Russia or between China or between both. And it's not going to end well. I'll tell you that now. It's not going to end well. It's going to end in disaster. I mean, France is talking about putting troops on the ground in Ukraine.
James.
On the border.
James.
Yeah.
One sec, James. Are you finished, James?
No, I was going to say France is talking about putting troops on the ground in Ukraine, but in Western Ukraine on the Dnieper River. But I think that's very, very dangerous. I think that's a serious risk of potentially escalating the war, which could then bring NATO into the war. And if that brings NATO into the war, well, you and I know that's not going to end well for either side.
Yeah, it's not good. Okay, so is it Sidgesi? Britt was first, by the way, Sidgesi, but then I'll give you a chance to come in. Let me let Britt come in quick. Britt, how you doing, Britt?
Hi, Chip. How are you?
Good, thank you.
I'm sorry. I didn't know that the panel was about Ukraine.
I can drop. I have a pro-Palestinian idea. But
Okay, well,
maybe
yeah, I tell you what, we'll probably get back to talking about that in a little bit, but if you want to hang on the panel, you can just wait. But I think Sidgesi wanted to say something about the current subject, so do you mind
I'll
waiting a
come
bit?
back. No,
Okay,
it's okay. I'll come back. I'll let you guys talk. Thank you so much for
okay.
having me.
Thanks for being here. Of course, thank you. Okay, is your name Syzygy? I can't say it properly.
Yeah, I'm CCG actually. I just want to refer to the previous speaker, James CC called. Um, Again, when I have seen that the biasness of our present generation is we want to modernize in many things that we think are like my gender. Now, in this 24th century, I can refer myself as a dog if I want to, because according to this modern generation, I can refer myself as a dog. But the only thing we cannot change is democracy. What is democracy? Because democracy doesn't really belong to us. If you refer democracy to its origin, this is thousands or maybe hundreds of years ago, which is by the Greeks as referred to the origin. But yet still, when we want to uh, put ourselves in particular situation or civilization, we refer to democracy. Can democracy also be like the way our genders are changed here, or our understanding or how AI is taking over all the previous texts that we have? Is it only democracy that should remain being democracy? If democracy remains to be democracy as we want it to be, then here for me is a problem, because we are modernizing everything except democracy. If democracy will remain as it is, then here democracy is a problem for me, because here there is a special kind of a category or a class of people who want to always refer to democracy when it befits them. But when it doesn't befit them, or when it doesn't befit their narrative, then these people are either terrorists or whatever class they will bring, according to what befits their narrative. But whenever the democracy befits their narrative, then it is democracy. But we can change with time, according to technology, according to all other class, but except democracy. I think it is time for us to also look at what is democracy in regards to what is the current challenges that we face. Because you referring to democracy into the origin of what is democracy, and yet it is not practical, as we know, because it depends on what nation you belong to. If I am an Afghanistan today, and you want to say democracy is what America brought to us, I will say, oh, the Iraqis, after Saddam Hussein have been taken over as a president, and all what we have is killing and more suicidal, and it was better for the Iraqis to have Saddam Hussein before Americans will come to Iraq, if that is what is democracy for you, or to go to Syria.
Syzygy, I'm sorry to jump in. You're going down a rabbit hole about I think what you're trying to say is that democracy can be viewed in terms of whoever it benefits at the time, dismissed as possible. That's completely off the subject. We can have a separate conversation about where democracy fits in, how it's manipulated, stuff like that. I don't want to go through every major Western nation and change a government and get into that. It's going to be a little tough for us to have the full
Can I jump
conversation.
in 1 second? I just want to say something. The lady that was on a minute ago that left, and she was saying that we were talking about Palestine, and now we've moved on to Ukraine. I think it's relevant that both situations are indirectly connected. I think they are anyway, and I think they are because I think it's basically the West in a way supporting a regime in Ukraine for its own needs, and again at the same time supporting the Israeli regime again for its own needs and benefits. Albeit, I agree that you've got AIPAC, which controls a lot of the senators, and obviously in the UK you've got the Friends of Israel, which control a lot of the politicians. But I think there's a lot more also going on as well there. And I think that we do start to. I think as a population of the world, we need to start looking at the bigger picture, not just going, oh, well, that's just Gaza over there, and that's just Ukraine over there. Look at what's behind every one of those situations. And Chip, no disrespect to your country, but it is the American administration and NATO or the Western world. The UK is very much a big player in interfering, and as is the French. The French are very much well known for it. So I think the sooner we start to realise the root cause of the problem in all of these situations, and then start to try and hold our governments accountable one way or another, whether it's in the UK at the moment, I've just joined the Workers' Party and I'm pushing for them to be elected. Obviously, George Galloway had a great victory up in Rochdale. I know the party's grown quite a bit. It was last month, it was at 21,500 and growing. I think we're up to about 23, 24,000 and it's continuously growing. So however we can make change happen, we need to start looking at that and start addressing it and start holding our administrations or governments to account, or our senators or our politicians.
Yeah, it's the two-party system, which pretty much everything is now in terms of Britain and the U.S. It's very hard to get elected with the money that flows through those two organizations. And even though AIPAC is a very influential group here, like you said, Friends of Israel in Britain is a very, very, very effective lobbying organization. So I think everything is tied together. You have Western multinational business interests. You have the militant natures of like the people who believe in the project for a new American century, the projection of U.S. power. And you can criticize the United States all you want. No reason to apologize. I agree that the government and the hierarchy of the oligarchs, the corporate heads, and the national security state all vie for the same type of interest. That's why they support Israel, because it's part of that whole projection of power in the Middle East. So it's a problem. I talk about it all the time. And I love the idea of organizing third parties and smaller people's parties and stuff like that. The challenge we run into, and again, maybe over time this can change, and I don't know how much time we have for it to change, but it's going to take a long time. And I don't know if it's going to be sufficient to put a big enough dent in the power that sort of collection of people have right now over what we're seeing the world go in the direction, which is kind of scary, potentially a nuclear conflict, people being marginalized and the wealthy getting wealthier and wealthier. It seems like everything's moving in the wrong direction for the average working class person right now versus.
Okay. My host.
Well, let me let Federico come in. Then we'll get back to you, Sigi. I promise. We gotta give somebody else a chance to jump in.
Hey, how are you guys? Hey, Chip, how's
Hey,
everybody doing?
good, thanks.
Yeah, I basically agree, man. Voting situation is two parties, and uh, it's a one way street on an island. When a flood happens, you can't run out, basically. But I think everybody is affected. Like every average citizen, I'm a business owner, and I've never been affected. I've been my own boss for a long time, and I have never suffered like I'm suffering now right here. And not only me, it's all the small businesses. I own a restaurant, so I go to something called Restaurant Depot, where the majority of the restaurants in the city of I live in Miami. The majority is 70% of the restaurants in Miami shops at Restaurant Depot. And last year it would take me an hour and a half to come in, do my shopping, and leave. Now I go in and out in 15 minutes. And other restaurant owners that used to go there, and I would see them on a day. I've been there for like 10 years now that I shop there. I know most of them. And then if I know someone that used to go there and shop 3, 4 carts, now he's shopping a cart or a half a cart. And everybody's suffering. And all of that, with plus supporting the wars abroad and all that stuff, I think people are ready to get pissed. And usually when people get pissed, the changes happen.
Real quick, just administratively for those in the chat, please do not use all caps. Everybody else making comments is doing a good job. I think there's someone named Alexandru Cyprian who keeps using all caps. Alexandru also asked a question. Let's just point this out to the audience. You said that everyone who is Jewish believes in the Talmud. For those who don't know what the Talmud is, it's a more sort of doctrinal religious text that the more radical members of the Jewish community tend to follow, who believe in Zionism and Jewish supremacy and the necessary, like we heard about Amalek, which was a reference by Benjamin Netanyahu. And those that believe in the Talmud believe that all other forms of non-Jewish life is sort of irrelevant and needs to be extinguished and exhausted for the sake of the Jewish people. I don't believe that many Jewish people believe that. I think that's nonsense. Not to disparage your religion. You can believe what you want. You can follow the flying spaghetti monster for all I care. But anybody who believes they're better than others can kill them at will. I'm not down with that, and I don't think you should be either. If you believe that stuff, then you're in a whole different category. Syzygy wanted to say something. What do you want to say, Syzygy?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest things that is harming us individually, because if the Jews feel that all other races are against them, is wrong. And when the whites think that all blacks are against them, is wrong. When the whites think that all blacks are against them, is wrong. We are in a generation where corporations who come together as a result of their individual benefits that are ruling the world. Can't it be time for us also, who are ordinary in this matter? Because for me, I am not about race. I don't want to do with a race or religion about Jews. And because at the end of the day, these are just ordinary people who are scrambling, who is anti-Semitic, who is who is racial when it comes to black and white. All these things they project into us is just to keep us apart so that they can continue having that position they have ever been able to have. What we are trying to do now is, okay, if we feel like we are the vulnerable, can't we come together and create that cooperation and be part of them so that we can be able to challenge them cooperative-wise, not individually? Because what is happening to us is you being black and you think that, all whites are against you. It's wrong. Or you becoming an ordinary Jew who is in Israel, who has nothing to do with the Zionist state, and yet still you see a lot of injustice happening to the non-Zionist people, and you think, oh, no, I'm an ordinary Israelis or ordinary Jews who just want to fight for that equal right. This is the manipulation that they are doing to us. Because we can never come together, because we keep on fighting on things that keep us apart. And with these things that we keep fighting for, this will never get us anywhere according to law. Not because I want it or you want it. This doesn't matter according to law. Again, according to law, we must be a corporation. And for us to have a say, can't we just come together as ordinary people, regardless of our origin, tradition, or religion? Race, this is the point. And in as much as we are not able to recognize this, no matter how we want to put it, democracy cannot save us. Because democracy is used against us whenever it is necessary. Or it can be for us whenever it is of their advantage. But what we are trying to say here is,
Syzygy, I'm going to be rude, but you keep talking about the same thing over and over again. So people understand that democracy can be co-opted as it is in the United States. And it would be very nice, like John Lennon said, if we could all imagine a better way of life where we work together, we cooperate, we're not fighting each other, we just kind of get along, and there's no more of this exploitative mindset and stuff like that. Here's the problem. For some reason, in the human condition, there's a capacity for great good and for great bad. And for some reason, those who rise to power tend to have more of the latter in their soul in terms of the ambition they use to get themselves ahead and the way they think in terms of how they look at others. And that sort of sociopathic lack of compassion, lack of concern for the other leads to the justification and exploitation. And I'm going to say this is going to be controversial, but what lies at that, unfortunately, is this false belief in what I call human supremacy. What do I mean by that? All of the Abrahamic religions give man, quote unquote, man or humans, this divine position vis-a-vis everything else that exists as we know it on the earth. And therefore, the man has the right to go out and multiply and to take advantage of or use everything else to his or her benefit. And that drives the legitimacy for exploitation. Hold on, Syzygy. I don't want to talk about democracy anymore. So if you want to talk about either Gaza or politics, I'm happy to talk about that, but we've already extinguished the idea about democracy, okay? So no more of that talk, if you don't mind.
Just want to jump in.
Here is the thing. again, when we want to only recognize ourselves according to religion, tribe, or race, here is the thing, what is going to happen to us? Because we have seen it over and over according to history that has ever happened. Because in as much as, we are even the last generation recognized. I mean, we have seen Romans here, the whatever civilization. But imagine the Bedouins. These were the Arabs who come from no civilization, who bring down the Roman Empire. Imagine the Roman Empire, who have been in existence in thousands of years. The only non-civilized regime that have ever brought them down is the the Islam. So what we are saying here is, again, it proven over and over to us that we cannot refer ourselves as a race or a tribe or a colony that will prevent us from the change of time. The only thing that we can do as human beings is, until we recognize one another as human beings and keep and avoid this classification, the only thing that is giving us this trouble is we tend to recognize one class against the other, giving one a priority over one another, and never recognizing that we are all human. The beauty about us is we can be of different tribes, we can be of different colors, we can be of different origin, but we remain being humans. And that is the key. Unless we are...
That's well said. I'm going to let James come in, but real quickly, yeah, I think in the end, if you asked a million people what they want in life, if you get very similar answers from all sorts of different people. They want their kids to be happy. They want to get access to food, a happy life, a good culture, to be living in peace. That'd be most people that would say that. However, the problem is you have a few rabble rousers who want more for them. They want to take from others. And that's the problem.
Yeah, actually, I agree with you on that, Chip. And one thing I'll say about what Ziggy was saying was we are one race. We're one human race. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, pink, or blue, or if you've got little green spots. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. Take away the skin and the pigmentation, and pretty much we're the same underneath all the way through. Now, what I wanted to say quickly is on the last thing I'm going to say about politics, and the reason why I'm going to bring this up is it is important. Again, what is happening in Gaza is being funded by Western governments. These are the governments that you've elected, okay? So I'll go back to what I've said. You need to look at the big picture, and that's how we ended up moving onto Ukraine earlier, because we were talking about Israel and Gaza and the horrific stuff that's going on there. But the two are interconnected, and it's very important that we recognize that our governments are supporting not just them two, they supported the killing and murder of over 1 million Iraqis. And there was the ongoing war that went on for over 20 years in Afghanistan. What was the end result there? The Taliban moved back in, nothing changed, okay? Apart from millions of people died, millions of people were displaced, okay? If you look at the overthrow of, or attempted overthrow of Bashar Assad in Syria, look how many people have died. Look at what happened there. If you look at the, Lebanon, all these Arab Spring uprisings, that they didn't just happen because the people decided that they wanted to change a government. They were supported and funded by Western governments, Western regimes that wanted those changes to happen. They wanted like the Egyptian president or the prime minister is Western. And if you look at the guy in charge of Libya, he's pro-Western. The guy in charge of Iraq, he's pro-Western. The guy in charge of Ukraine, he's pro-Western. These are all interconnected. They're very important. And it's very important that we grasp this. If we're going to have a war, we should have a class war against the people like the Rothschilds, the people that run that island called Davos, that control most of our politicians through Zionism. Okay, this is the war that we should have against these people that are really creating the death and the suffering around the world.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not going to happen anytime soon, but I hope to goodness, if things continue the way they are, that we do have that war.
Yeah, I think the idea that we all should get along and be, people tend to be tribal. That's just the nature of humans to be collective in their group. So it's not unusual for that to be the case. But like I said before, if you asked each member of that tribe, what do you want? Most would say very similar things. The problem is some of the people that rise to be leaders or who want more, they have a desire for more, tend to guide their tribe in the direction of conquest and not towards peaceful coexistence. And we're seeing that today. The leaders that James was referring to earlier are a transnational class of oligarchs who see return on capital and capitalism as the operating system in which the world has peace and harmony, which of course it doesn't. And it's because I call them the sociopathic serial accumulators, because they tend to look the other way at the harm that's caused through the various endeavors they support, which they think are perfectly benign, but of course they aren't. And we know that things for profit should never be for profit. I don't think healthcare should be for profit. I don't think imprisonment or incarceration should be for profit. I don't think the
Healthcare should
fire
be free
department.
across the entire world. Sorry, Chip. Healthcare should be free across the entire world. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. So somebody in the chat earlier says, why don't you have more balance in the panel? I'm happy to have more balance in the panel. Someone tried to come up who had I'm assuming he's pro-Israel. He had what looked like a Hebrew name, and he didn't make it in. I tried to bring him up, and then he kind of faded away. So I gave the person instructions on how to come back up. They didn't come. Others in the chat haven't asked to come up. If you want to know how to ask to come up, if you're interested, there's a little button, a little like thing you can press just right of center. It's like a blue and red guest request button. So if you tap that and then hit request, then you appear in my queue, and then I can bring you up. So if you're someone who wants to speak on behalf of Israel or that point of view, I'm happy to have you. I will treat you with respect and dignity. I will let you share your points. We may not agree. We may have conversation back and forth, but I'm happy to have you come up and share your point of view. I've been criticized for giving people too much airtime who happen to believe in that point of view. So again, I can't win for losing on either side.
I'm going to go, mate, because it's like 1 o'clock in the UK and I need my beauty sleep. But before I go, I just want to make a statement, and that is free Palestine. And I hope and pray that an independent Palestinian state is formed. And I hope and pray that the government and current regime of Israel is overthrown and put on trial for war crimes, because that's my belief of what should happen. Thank you very much, Chip.
Hey,
Take
James,
care.
before you go to sleep,
Thanks, James. Thanks for being here. Get some rest over there in the UK.
just want to point something to James, that it's no longer the Western leaders. There is Arab leaders that are even worse than the Western leaders. So there is a bunch of the leaders, like the Egyptian leader or the Jordanian leader, or all of these people are no different than Joe Biden, or no different of Sunak, or no different than anyone. It's just, it's all about money. And it happened that the Middle East has the wealth of the world, or most of it, and it's all about money. They all going after the money. And I believe in here about, Jewish and Palestinians. I'm not talking Zionists. Jewish and Palestinians are the victim of that money thing and wealth.
Yep. But look, I've got to go. Take care, people. Take care. Good night.
Thanks a lot. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, it's I think money's the problem. So we have Cowboy Archaeologist. That's kind of an interesting name. How you doing, Cowboy?
How you doing, Chip? Yeah, I'm an actual archaeologist and historian.
Cool.
But I also wanted to point out that tankers suck, because the infantry, God loves the infantry.
Oh, they call us treadheads, by the way. That's what the infantry call us. Treadheads.
I mean, that was back in the 90s. I get that, but I was at 11 Charlie for 12 years.
Good for you.
So I am a combat veteran from both OIF and OEF. Served with 1st Armored Division, 10th Mountain Infantry. Deployed with 10th Mountain twice. Once with 1st Armored Division in initial days in 03 and 04. And, respectively, sir, I have to disagree with quite a bit that you have been saying. And sure. I'm not going to go against you. This has actually been the most civil live in this discussion that I've seen, with the respect to another individual that I follow named Dino Rider, also known as Nick. I don't know if you have heard of this individual. But he actually does on this side go and um, bring up a lot of points, and I
Mhm.
appreciate you having a civil conversation without crazy blasting and whatnot, because that's not what you get on here.
Yeah. So you said you had some disagreements. I'm happy to hear it. What are your point of views you wanted to share?
Sure. So actually, you had said earlier this evening that up to 1948, even 1947, 1948, that the Jews within Israel had taken taken by force only because of, how is it that you paraphrased it? I'm only paraphrasing here, but
I
how'd you
think I
phrase
used
it?
the word. I think I used the word Zionist, not Jews.
Zionist. Okay, so Zionist. So first off, I've got to ask if you understand what the Zionist movement is.
Well, the Zionism is simply the goal to have a Jewish homeland in the Holy Land. I understand. I understand what the term means in terms of its core belief. The challenge is that it's been pushed into something much broader than that, even though the initial goal is perfectly reasonable. And those who are the hardline Zionists have done a lot more than just have a peaceable settling into a Jewish homeland.
Okay, and I would agree, and so would a lot of people or individuals on the Zionist side would agree, especially with what Ben Gurion did in the initial days of that. But at the same time, look at what Ben Gurion was. He was a socialist Marxist. I mean,
Mhm.
on the extreme far left. When it came down to it, is that he was a classicist, especially how he mistreated the Mithrashi Jews. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, and how he had also exclaimed how that they were barbaric and had to live outside away from the Ashkenazi Jews,
Right.
which don't agree with that. However, it has changed in that dynamic that, like any other nation that builds up on a constitution, it allowed for change to happen, which we see now, and it's very untrue that the Arabs want to be extinct, or the Arabs, or I'm sorry, the Israelis want to eliminate the Arabs out of that land. It's kind of untrue, definitely, over the fact that 2 million Arabs live within Israel, serving the IDF, are in the Knesset, have also turned has also one was in this, or quite a few have been in the Supreme Court, or their
Right.
version of it. One judge had also prosecuted an Israeli prime minister. I think it was back in 2012. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I find that disingenuous only over the fact that,
That was Olmert that got prosecuted.
right, right. And I can't remember exactly what he was prosecuted for.
It was corruption.
Yeah, but I mean, at what level? Because of, was he scamming money, or
It was just bribes. It was just bribes. He. By the way, just to let you know, earlier you said about. I acknowledged earlier when I talked about the number of Arab civilians, citizens inside of Israel of Arab descent.
okay, I didn't hear
That
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 part.
many. That yeah, you probably didn't hear this. So I said that just like in the United States, they're a minority, but many members have been able to move strategically through society into positions of power and other positions of wealth. And it does happen. But I said, on balance, most people of Arab descent, being a minority in that society, are not treated with the same dignity and respect, and don't have the same value according to most people in that society, even if it's on paper. Just like in America, we all know that our situation on paper says that all men are created equal and have the right to pursuit of happiness, but we all know that in reality things don't work out the way that the ideals would put forth.
Okay, well, I would respectfully disagree with that over the Israelis that I have spoken with, and they don't tokenize their Arab friends and whatnot, because the fact of the matter is that they're their neighbors. Some of them intermarry. Some of them either convert either way to Islam or into Judaism. Either way, it goes back and forth. The wealth of culture that is shared back and forth. That's something that I've talked to with Israelis, not just while I on this app, but in real life, especially when I had been overseas. And especially seeing how the treatment with Arabs within the IDF who serve within the IDF are treated just as miserably as the Jews that serve within the IDF. And we were both in the military. We know that that time is awesome and rewarding, but at the same time miserable. I mean, you went to Fort Knox, right? For
I
basic.
did. Yep.
Yeah, I went to the home of the Wayward Boys, also known as Fort Benning.
Been there too.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that I think it's really misrepresented that Arabs within Israel are mistreated when in fact that's not. Now, I also want to touch on another point that you had stated.
But real
That,
quick, before you move on, the reason I
sure,
made
sure.
that argument was not because I have some sort of theoretical thought about it. It's that the reports that I've heard for over and over again from people who aren't in the higher echelons of society. And when I was in the military, everybody's your buddy, so you just kind of have to work with each other. There's no
Yeah.
sort of everyone's equal in there because you have to survive. So
Yeah,
there's not as much
don't be a
there's
Bravo
not as much
Foxtrot.
BS in society. We talked about groups earlier. People tend to gravitate towards their group
Yes,
of people.
tribalism.
In
Correct.
societies, those cleavages tend to play out much differently. Now, the wealthy and the professional class is its own class of people. It's its own group. The remainder of society, most of whom don't make it into these higher positions, have to deal with the other circumstances that those who are professionals don't. Those are the people to whom I'm referring that are treated as second-class citizens in Israel.
So, I mean, like I said, I disagree from individuals that I have spoken to, not just on this app, but in real life, over that treatment. In fact, statistically, it shows that the middle class, even Arabs and Jews, share the same wealth, but at the same time are by far some of the more richest people in the region, due to the fact that they're making anywhere between, from what I remember, the number on the statistics was anywhere between 30,000 and 75,000 shekels. I can't remember what the USD conversion from shekels to dollar
Would
was.
it be okay? What I'd like to do is, I'm American, you're American. It'd be nice to get somebody who knows some people maybe who actually live there or who have lived there or who knows somebody, somebody's more from the region. Federico, are you at all tied into that at all, or is that something I shouldn't make a
Yeah,
presumption?
I'm very familiar. I'm Lebanese,
Do you mind
so
sharing your point of view just to see how you think?
my point of view, Cowboy, how you doing, buddy?
Federico, good. How are you?
Good. Listen, I think whoever talked to you just left out the story that when the Palestinians that are Israelis, they had two options: either you lose your home or you take the Israeli passport. So if you decided not to become an Israeli citizen, you were kicked out of your land, kicked out of your house. And out of that 2 million Arabs that lives in Israel, there is about probably 500,000 that escaped Lebanon, that they used to work for the IDF in Lebanon. And when Lebanon was liberated, they all ran away and seeked refuge in Israel, which is the Israeli took them over and made them citizens. But that is not that's not the fact and not the case. That they are treated equal, that is not the case. Not even I'm gonna leave the Arabs out. Not even the Jews between themselves, like the Falasha, don't have the same right that the Ashkenazi have, or the Haredim don't have the same right that the Ashkenazi has. So even within the Israeli society, there is a lot of inequality.
Oh, I'm not going to argue that,
Yeah.
actually,
So
because
imagine if the inequality is between Jews themselves. So imagine how is it going to be towards non-Jews?
so. I mean, I'm going to agree with that because when it comes down to it, classism throughout the world is a huge problem. So it's not surprising that you would see any form of classism within that society. However, within Israel, everyone still has the same rights, whether they're Jewish or Muslim or Arab or Levantine.
Same in
However,
Iran, you know that, right?
what's that?
In Iran, the same.
Well, not really. In Iran, there's
Oh
only
yeah,
how many
you search it.
Jewish individuals are allowed or are left in Iran since the
Le-
IRGC has arisen.
whoever left voluntarily. No, they were not being forced to live. But if you go look for the Jewish community in Iran, they have equal right to all other religions. They get, let's say the government gives $100,000 to a mosque. They will give $100,000 to a synagogue. They will give $100,000 to a church. There is not because you're a Jew, you're not getting, or your taxes are higher. It's all misconception. There is a lot of the ideas that goes around are just propaganda, just to manipulate the world. And believe it or not, we are all, you're as an American, I am an American too. I believe, even though I wasn't born in the United States, but I have children and I have grandchildren in America that they were born here, and this is their country. And I would fight for this country as much as I would fight for Lebanon. We are sucked, we are deeply ruined by the Zionist entity. Now, there is a conception that they say, the Zionist entity is to bring the Jews all together and all of that stuff. The idea is wonderful. The thought is great. But the reality is that the Zionist movement is corrupted within themselves. They're using the minority of the Jews to commit stuff in their name, and which is in the end, they will get, how you say it, the Jews will pay for it. And let me tell you, in history and in all of that, in our, what we've been taught, that Jews are our cousins. Like since we were kids, although, I lived the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. And even though when we speak out of the Israeli, we don't mention the Jewish religion. We mention the Zionist entity because we're Abrahamic. So let's say, and you've heard it a lot of these Zionists come out and cuss Islam and say Islam is a terrorist, Islam, they burn the Quran. We are not allowed by our religion to do such a thing. Like, I'm not allowed to come up here and cuss the Jewish people for any reason because it's a sin in my religion. That's why you see a lot of the Zionists come out and cuss Islam, and you hear very few, and these few that comes out and talk bad about Jewish, these because they're ignorant. They were raised in an ignorant society. They were brought up in an ignorant society. Our problem is not with the Jews. If you go back to history, you will see that Arabs and Jews lived in Jerusalem, in Palestine, in peace and harmony. There has always been disputes between everyone. Like any two people that lives together in the same house or in the same region, eventually they're gonna fight. But that fight never gets to a point where either me or you. We had people that Arab family that babysat Jewish kids, where the Jews were trusted the Arab with their kids, and the same vice versa, where Arab had Jewish neighbor. In Ramadan, they would make food and they would give it to the Christian house and they would give it to the Jewish house. In Christmas time, the Jews and the Muslims and the Christians that celebrated together. So, but there is always small stories that now they use it to make it big and make it seems like we never cared about the Jews. In 1948, if you go look for videos, when the Jewish migration to Palestine was happening, the Palestinians were going to the port, bringing in families and put them in their houses. So there is a lot of, I think as an American, and what the idea of America stands for, you always have to go out of the box and stand on a biased mentality and look at things from the look at things from the outside. No judgment, don't listen to anybody, don't take anybody's idea, but go with your guts. You know what's right, you know what's wrong. And we all know what's right and what's wrong. And it's kind of like, like racism. Racism, it's an animal that we all have. Every one of us is a racist. But some of us raise that animal to be aggressive, and some of us raise that animal to be a domestic pet that has no say. But again, it's all within us, what we do, what we bring out. You feel me?
Yeah, I understand completely what you're saying because when it comes right down to it, racism is inherently learned. It's not. It's not. You're not born with it. Same with tribalism. I mean, that's a study that we've done in anthropology multiple times, that or reviewed in anthropology multiple times with multiple ethnicities throughout the world. But when it comes right down to it, is that within the last several years, we have seen that. Well, especially in the last several months, that as what was the synergy? What he was stating is that we've seen a lot of people who weren't Zionist individuals who weren't Zionists, but Jews in general, be attacked for just being Jews. I mean, we saw that in October or in November at NYU, where individuals had locked kids in the library for simply being Jews. One fellow in LA, he was unalived, unfortunately, as a counter protester.
Did you hear about the Canadian, the guy that owned the shop in Canada that got arrested?
No, that's pretty vague. I mean, maybe.
You know, there is a lot of stuff that plays in factor. This guy, he's a Jewish. He vandalized his own store and went on a rampage that somebody vandalized his own store. You can look it up; you'll find it. And
So
on the
sure,
end,
yeah. Let's look that
yeah,
up and let's see
yeah.
what
And
that
and
what
on the
that
end,
was.
the Canadian police determined that the guy did it himself. Like he vandalized his own store to come out and say. Now, an individual acts. These are instigated by politics. For you to stop these small individual acts, you have to go to the root cause. Like I cannot judge the whole Arab community or the Muslim community on the action of one that was instigated. You know, like we say, we have ignorant people in every part of the world. But what makes that guy act like this is the root cause. The root cause is what's happening to the Palestinian people. Now, I agree with you that you know some Jews were harmed, but at the same time, there is a lot of pro-Palestinians that got harmed last time in Columbia University, where these 3 IDF soldiers went in and skunk sprayed everyone.
In Colombia?
Columbian University, yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. What are IDF soldiers doing in Colombia?
Good
Exactly.
question.
That's the
Good
question.
question.
That's the question you should look for.
I mean, okay, so let's look that up because that's the first time I'm ever hearing about that.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
So
it was on the front page of the New York Times.
I'm really iffy when it comes down to the New York Times.
I
So
mean,
Well, whatever. I mean, it was
as,
covered in
as
all
far
sorts
as
of media. That
credibility
was my point.
goes.
No, it was covered all over the place. It did hit happened.
All right. So first off, let's see.
By the way, real quick, while you're looking that up, there's somebody in the request box. But there's a guy named Dapper who's been on here a couple times before, and I'm hesitant to bring him up because all he does is personally disparage myself and the panel, and then anytime we say anything that he doesn't agree with, he calls us anti-Semitic. So it's that silliness that deflects from the issues. But if he comes back in, if you all want me to bring him up, I'll bring him up. I try not to exclude
No,
any
Tip.
voices.
I don't think
Please
so.
don't. Please don't, Tip.
He's one of the consequences we're talking about. He's one of the small little pieces that acts with their brain, emotional. He doesn't act with his rational understanding. He doesn't want to get to he
Chip,
doesn't
can I
want to get.
offer a comment because I have to jump off soon?
Anyway,
So
Brenda,
let's see.
welcome. Would you like
I'm
to?
trying to find a credible source when
Yeah.
when
Can you hear me?
comes down to it.
Yeah, just
Oh,
type in skunk spray Columbia University IDF or something like that. You'll see there's 3 different.
Well,
there's
actually,
3
I typed in IDF soldiers at Columbia. So it's stating that 2 university students both Oh wait, that's out of Acts. It's coming from the students of
Chip, while he reads that, can I
Palestine.
offer a comment?
Yeah, go ahead. While you look it up, go ahead, Brenda.
Okay. Yeah, no, thanks, Chip, for having me on. I think, my main point, just based on, the commentary that is happening right now is, I think part of decolonizing our minds is that we need to stop centering what colonizers and what the people doing the oppressing are stating things as facts. So when the IDF says that they offer equal rights to everybody, we need to start seeing, what do Palestinians have to say about that? What do, Israeli Palestinians, the ones that hold passports, do they think that they have rights? I think when we take the Israeli word as a fact, but the Palestinian word is always doubted. Why is that? We have to start thinking that it's because of all, just like Federico was saying, our inherent racism. We all have it. And even those of us that are in the minorities, we need to start accepting this type of rhetoric as just saying like, yeah, we're just going to take their word for it. If they say that they are the most moral army in the world, we just take their word for it because, there's that saying that says, a society is measured by how they treat their most vulnerable. Well, let's talk to the most vulnerable in Palestine. What do they have to say about that society? I guarantee you they're not going to think that the IDF is the most moral army in the world. Most Palestinians don't want ill on Israelis. They just want to live free. And so my friend, archaeologist, I appreciate you coming up here, but I think there's a lot of deconstructing that you have to do and a lot more listening because, obviously, that you are in the upper echelons when it comes to privilege. I grew up in the United States as a minority female. My perspective of what it is to be an American is a lot different than what your perspective is. And so I think this is something that we are usually, we have to decolonize what our privilege is. And we need to start stepping aside and letting the actual people who are being oppressed have a voice and speak and take their word for it. Because Palestinians are called T-words because of a racist propaganda from the United States that started in 9/11. So when we call all Palestinians T-words and even the H group T-words, because they're actually a resistance group, when we call them terrorists, it's because of our racism, because we don't believe that brown lives are as important as white lives when they should be equal. And that's something that we need to start deconstructing. And I invite everybody who is in the panel, who's listening, to start pushing back on that rhetoric, to start pushing back on the fact that we have not done the decolonization that we need to have done by now. Because if we had, we wouldn't be in the situation. We wouldn't be accepting this because we would immediately recognize that Israel is the last standing colonial state. It's a colonial project that is being supported by all the Western powers because all the Western powers are colonials, have colonial history. So I think it's been 6 months. We need to it's getting to the point where it's too much. It's too much. If you don't know by now, step aside. That's all I had to say. I have to travel tomorrow, Chip. Thank you so much for having me on.
Okay, Brenda, thanks for being here.
And
So,
Cowboy,
respond,
yeah,
please.
one question. You served in the army, right?
Yes.
Okay. And if you are serving somewhere and you see your fellow soldier grabbing kids and putting them against the wall just to take a picture and brag about it, how would you feel about
What
your
are they doing against putting them against the wall in the first place? See, this is kind of a
this?
big false
Yeah.
dichotomy
No,
question.
no. That's not a
What
false.
are they
That's
doing? If
yeah.
are they forcefully? Because in this hypothetical situation, all you're saying
I'm
is
not
you're
talking
putting them
about
against the
Gaza. I'm
wall.
not talking about Gaza. I'm talking about myself. In the invasion of Israel to Lebanon in 1982, I was 9 years old. And
Well, didn't also in 1982 that the Lebanese Civil War started thanks
in
to
70 in 73 it started.
oh, so
73
73, but
74.
it's so it was also one of the most bloodiest,
Yes, I lived
downright
there.
nastiest civil wars in
I
Middle
lived it
Eastern
all.
history.
I lived
It was,
yes.
and on top of
Yeah.
that, wasn't that also that the Palestinian refugees had sided with the socialist revolutionaries to overthrow the Lebanese government.
Well, there's a lot of speculation about that, but let me go back to
Well,
the
I mean, that's documented.
yeah. We're gonna get that to this point, but I'm gonna get to the point where I told you I was 9 years old, walking the street with my brother. They would grab us, put us on the wall, put your hand on top of your head, and take turns taking pictures with us. I'm 9 years old.
So all you
That
were
is,
doing was putting your hands on top of your head. I
put
mean,
your
were they
head.
doing anything violent? Well, first off, they shouldn't have grabbed you in the first place. But
Okay, but it did happen, and they did take
okay,
they
I'm
did take
sorry you went
pictures.
through
Yep.
that.
No, I that didn't make me any weaker. That made me stronger, and made me
I'm glad you don't carry a victim
yeah.
mentality.
I usually the oppressed doesn't have a PTSD. The oppressor will have a PTSD. If I'm fighting against somebody that invading my house and I unalive that person, I will not have bad dreams about him. But if somebody comes to my house and unalives me and he goes to sleep, he will have bad dreams about that one because he
Well, of
knows
course, that's a terrible thing to do.
what he did it was wrong. Now go back to the civil war. The civil war of Lebanon was instigated by many factors. And I don't know if you don't know if you know that Israel has no written constitution. That is for sure. That's certain. Second of all, if you understand what the Israeli flag stands for, do you know what the Israeli flag stands for?
Yes, from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean,
From
Jewish state.
the Nile to the Furat, a
Oh,
Jewish
hold up.
state.
The Nile's nowhere near
Yes, it's
Israel.
nowhere near Israel, the modern so-called Israel, but the actual
Well,
meaning.
the ancient Israel was nowhere near the Nile either. It's in the same spot. In fact, Judea proper extended it into the Sinai and up
Google.
into modern day Syria, all the way up to the River Euphrates, or nearly to the River Euphrates, partially part of what's considered modern day Iraq. So I don't know how you're going to say that it's the River Nile.
It's not. I'm saying just Google. You're in front of the computer. Google the Great Israel and see what is the Great Israel stands for. From
You
where
mean
to where?
Judea, the original Judea?
Israel. They want to call it Israel. That's what they say. From
Well,
the
Israel
Nile
was
to
one of the
the
name terms
yeah.
back then. In fact, it's in the Menetra Stele, created by Ramses in the 13th century. His acknowledgement of the kingdom of Yisrael after his the 12th century, also known as the Victory Stele, created by, like I said, Ramses III after his defeat of the Sea Peoples after the Bronze Age collapsed. So, I mean, I don't know how you could say that it's from
I
the
don't say
Nile
it. I
when
don't say it. I'm
Egypt.
not.
They are the ones saying that.
I'm not the one saying it. They claim it. That's what they want to.
But that's not what it stands for. That's
Let me
not
do this.
what
Hold on.
it
Real quick.
stands for.
Everybody, real quick, we're jumping on each other. Just here's one you can do, Cowboy. Type in Daniela Weiss, Greater Israel. Just that'll give you a guide to what they're referring to, and then you'll see exactly what they're talking about. And so let me do this. Just give you guys a second to do this. So Federico, let me just share this. So the idea would be this. Netanyahu also took a map to the UN when he was talking about the next stages of development, and he had this area outlined on the map as Israel. Same area that you'll see Daniela Weiss and Greater Israel referred to as. So I think the idea is that, Israel tries to play this little solemn victim in the Middle East that everybody from outside wants to tackle and take over. And yet it is the one that has expansionist aims based on its broader long-term objectives.
Well, if that was the case, then how come in 1964, after that war, Israel gave back lands that they had, this parts of Sinai, parts of Jordan, back to Jordan and Israel,
Well,
or
the war was
Egypt
in
back.
1967. It was the Six Day
I'm
War.
sorry, 1967. My bad.
And the reason why is that in the 90s they decided that a peace agreement with Egypt was worth more than maintaining their control of the land. So they decided to relinquish it in return for peaceful relations, which have been maintained to this day.
Well, you're correct, but also at the same
They
time, that
forced to
same
give
year
it
after
back. Yeah.
1967, they gave back what they had conquered.
Well, the point was they
same
exchanged
year.
the conquered land for a long-term peace agreement with Egypt. That's what
Right.
they.
I mean, that's not very expansionist if that's the case.
Well, that was a political decision based on trying to maintain the security of the nation state. It was a calculated choice versus trying to maintain territory that was conquered versus trying to maintain the existence of the nation state.
At the same time, it's also trying to keep security and conflict from erupting in the region. So, if, like I said, going back, it's not entirely expansionist when you're giving back.
Well, it's not giving back. In other words, if I give you a car and you give me $30,000, am I giving? Hold on, let me finish. If I give
I'm
you a
not saying
car,
anything. I was just clicking my chair.
if I give you a car and you give me $30,000, am I giving you back a car?
Well, that's an agreement between each other, but at the same time, it's
That's
a
what that
tit for
was.
tat situation.
That's what
That's
that
how
was.
peace agreements work.
That's what that was. It was an agreement where the Israelis calculated at the time that the benefits to their nation state of peace with Egypt, their neighbor, was greater than maintaining the ownership of that particular slice of territory, which at the time was not that strategically valuable to them vis-a-vis the peace agreement.
I mean, you're correct. It would be hard economically to maintain that piece of land. I agree. At the same time, the Sinai is pretty barren, but it wasn't started by Israel. That war wasn't started. Actually, there hasn't been a documented war started by Israel.
It was.
Cowboy,
How was it started?
That's a
They were
misperception,
attacked.
Cowboy. That's not correct.
Cowboy.
Correct.
Listen, conquering a land and maintaining a land, it doesn't mean that you have to have a foot soldier in there. The Zionist idea is to conquer financially. It means you can live in that land, you can call it your land, but as long as we control your resources and your income and your coming and your going, that is enough for them to conquer. It doesn't mean that from the Nile to the Furat, one state, it means that, oh, no, we're going to have only, no. The idea is to conquer financially, economically,
Well, that's
culture.
commercialism, Federico. I'm sorry, but I'd rather have commercialism over violence any day. I'd rather have economics any day. Especially with our adversaries in China, I would rather us have a trade war than an all-out war. I would rather there be tariffs and negotiations for economic exchange in goods and services versus blood being shed. And
But when
in
you use blood to shed to get to achieve that goal, that is, it's like I tell you about the United States. Okay, but leave Israel out of it. The United States, if the United States go to the Middle East and be in a peaceful manner without supporting the state of Israel, you know, all of us, we were raised wearing a Nike hat, an Adidas shirt, a USA flag. We never minded that. I don't know. So
well, going back to the 6-day war, Federico, and Mr. Barnes here, I mean, I just pulled that up prior to the start of the war. And this is by encyclopedia.britannica.com. You can look this up, Encyclopedia Britannica, or britannica.com/events/6-day-war. Background and escalation. Prior to the start of the war, attacks conducted against Israel by fledgling Palestinian groups or guerrilla groups based in Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan had increased, leading to costly Israeli reprisals. In November 1966, an Israeli strike on the village of Al Samanu in the Jordanian West Bank left 18 dead and unalived, and 54 wounded. And during the air battle in Syria, in April 1967, the Israeli force shot down 6 Syrian MiG fighter jets. Now, with that being said, who again shot the first rounds, because it's stating, unless Britannica is completely wrong, and we all know that Encyclopedia Britannica is not Wikipedia, it's an actual reputable source, it's been around for the last 150 years. Unless they're wrong, I still go by my statement that Israel didn't attack anyone, they were yet again attacked.
No, the military, what the events that you're talking about were not a large scale military incursion. They were minor skirmishes. But what Israel did was, and this just go to Google and type in this: who started the 1967 war? Very simple search. And the number one result that comes back: on the morning of June 5th, 1967, Israel launched a preemptive strike against Egyptian forces in response to Egypt closing the Straits of Tiran, basically the Suez Canal.
Okay, and they were well within their right, because the Suez Canal is under agreement to be international waters.
Nope, it's not. That's not correct, because to launch an attack against somebody's air force and bomb their entire air force out of existence, and then move into a territory that was then Transjordan and occupy it militarily by saying it was preemptive, that's like the U.S. going into Iraq and saying, well, we thought there were WMDs, so therefore we can take over this particular territory and exploit its resources and people.
I mean, I would agree but the comparison, or I would agree with you about Iraq. However, the comparison is not the same. Also, on top of that, by June 11, the conflict had come to include Jordan and Syria. As a result of the conflict, Israel gained control of the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. Also, the Suez Canal, the Suez Canal, under agreement between Israel and Egypt, was not to be closed off, but yet Egypt, under their own agreements, closed it off. So why? Does that go with the Suez Canal crisis of 1956?
No. It's separate time frame.
Right, but is that an after result? All right.
That I'm actually not clear on that, so I'm going to look into that to make sure I can understand that, how it fits in. But the point is,
this is from the website. It is part of the U.S. Department of State archive. So if you look on the third paragraph within that, on May 13, Nasser received a secret message from the Soviet Union, which supplied both Egypt and Syria with weapons, informing him that Israel had massed troops at the Syrian border. Nasser took immediate steps to uphold his pledge to Syria. On May 14th, he mobilized his army, and 3 days later, he asked the United States Secretary General Thant, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, to remove the United Nations emergency forces that had been stationed on the Sinai Peninsula since the end of the Suez Canal crisis of 1956. So in all, it was a response by Egypt to remove UN forces out of there.
Yeah, that happened. I agree with that.
Right. So, when it comes right down to it, again, Egypt being the aggressor here by saying, look, to include the UN, or Egypt's part of the UN, so they're also sending some of their forces within the border. But at the same time, you can't just turn around and ignore the fact that they were smuggling weapons in.
Yeah, I understand that, but who actually attacked whom?
Well, that was a preemptive. That was preemptive. However, leading up to that, it's Ahmed. Can I please finish? All right, I appreciate it. Up to that, they were being attacked by guerrilla groups, as I had stated from the Britannica source. All right, so by Syria and Lebanon. If that's the case, were those weapons from guerrilla groups based out of Syria and Lebanon, were they getting weapons supplied in from the Suez Canal afterwards? After the UN removed, or was that something else? Because if Egypt is keeping third-party organizations and representatives from observing, as they normally do, observing to make sure that no hostile weapons or illegal paraphernalia comes into the Suez Canal, it's kind of a little bit of a shady situation thinking that, okay, they may have actually been weaponized by the weapons that were coming into the Suez, and Egypt wanted to keep that. So, I mean, wouldn't that be justified? I mean, we do that with the cartels here in the U.S. So, what would you have them do if weapons were being smuggled in, and then those weapons were being used on the state of Israel?
So
Well,
according to
I
you,
think. Go ahead,
yeah,
Federico.
yeah, according to you,
This is a
the
historian.
preventive.
This is
No, no,
documented.
no, 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 no. According to your theory, the war that Vladimir Putin has raised on Ukraine right now is
I
justified.
didn't mention Vladimir Putin at all.
I know
So
exactly, but
please don't
it's the
pivot.
same. No, no, it's the same theory,
No, it's not.
because he says it's a preventive war.
This is not a preventive war.
He says
Putin
so.
could say Putin could say all he wants. He's a lunatic. All right.
Exactly
You
what
talk
that's.
to anybody, any Russian Americans. This guy
Yeah.
Vladimir will go off on a tangent about medieval history for hours before he gets to his main point. Much like he did with the Tucker Carlson interview that we all.
Let's
This
Cowboy,
is
Cowboy,
exactly.
let's
Can I say
Cowboy.
something,
Hold on,
please?
Cowboy.
I'm
Yeah, real
silent
quick,
from long
real
time.
quick. I want to Cowboy. We got to give some other folks a chance to say a couple things more than two sentences. Okay, so let them have a chance to speak, and then we'll get a chance to respond. Go ahead, Amjad.
First, for the issue of Mr. Cowboy saying about Israel return land to Egypt and to Lebanon. And first, Egypt win the war 19 October. In October, the war in October, they win the war, and result of that, they return Sinai because they win 1973 war. And
I'm sorry
also,
to interrupt, but Chip, I just received a death threat on one of your comments here by someone called M.
What?
Ratty.
Who? That's crazy.
M. Ratty.
Let me see if I
no,
can find it.
we
Hold
don't
on.
agree with that. We don't agree.
Yeah, guys, whoever said something, do never threaten somebody. Just be kind
No,
to each other.
no.
We can disagree. That's okay. M. Ratty, I'm looking for the comments. I don't see it.
It's about
I didn't hear anything from Cowboy saying besides he's seeking information. We're exchanging ideas. I
Yeah.
don't know
about
what it.
19
What,
messages.
yeah,
No.
yeah,
We will not accept or tolerate anybody
none
threat
of that.
anybody.
Oh, I see. Mr. Addy. Okay, with the blocks. Okay, I see what you're saying. I didn't see the comment though.
Yeah, it says exactly KILWU.
What is that?
No.
Were you trying to say that, Cal? I want to make sure that somebody was being clarified. Maybe that was a misspelling. I don't know.
No,
Maybe,
that says at Cowboy Archaeologist exactly KILWU.
what is
YU.
KILW mean? I'm not sure. Maybe it was a mistyping though. I don't want to make the assumption it was that unless we absolutely know for sure. But anyway, please don't threaten each other if you're doing that. That's insane. Thanks for letting us know. We'll get to the bottom of it. Let Amjad continue. Thanks. Sorry about
Okay.
that, Cowboy.
For Lebanon, the land returned to Lebanon by the resistant win the war against the Zionist regime in Israel. The Islamic resistance win the war. So any land returned to the Arab people from Israel returned by winning a war, not by Israel volunteer and they given back land. After 1973, when Egypt won the war, Israel realized that they can't continue keeping the land in because it was just left some territory in Sinai occupied. So they after the peace agreement they give that it was Taba and some other places in Sinai, but the majority of Sinai being taken back by the Egyptian army. Also, the same thing happened in Lebanon. Israel don't give land back. If they occupy the land, they will never give it back peacefully unless it been taken by force. To the point before you was talking about my friend here, Federico, was talking about the Jewish and the Muslims live together. It's part of our religion that we believe in the Jewish religion as we believe in Islam. It's part of our religion that we believe in the holy book of Moses, that we believe in Moses. So the issue today is not Muslim and Jewish. How much Muslims in New York and Jewish are partner in business? I know for sure. I know about 5 Muslims. They are partner in business with Jewish in New York. It's not the issue of Jewish and Muslim. But if we go back to so-called Israel today, and we uh, find out how many atheists in Israel, we find 75% of the population of so-called Zionist Israelis are atheists. They don't believe in any God. They are not Jewish. They don't have nothing to do with the Jewish religion. If also we examine the DNA of those people, they come from different nations, different ethnic nations. Some from Germany, some from America, some from Africa, some from Asia, some from different countries. They are not related. They have no evidence. They have any DNA connect them with Middle East. Not any one of them approve that they have DNA. Also, the Israeli scientists for ruins, they never find one coin or one thing after searching all Palestine that this coin or this ruin approve that the Jewish have history in Palestine. They have no history. You are speaking about the Jewish was in the time of Jesus. Today they are find those people are found in Palestine. They live from history. We call them as Sumara. Sumara is Jewish Arabs. They are not from Germany. They are not from America. They are not from Russia. They are not from any other country. They have uh, those Sumara Arab Jewish, they are not connected in any DNA with any Jewish come from, or any sorry, not Jewish, any Zionist come from Russia or come from Europe or come from America or come from Africa so those people have no history, no DNA roots in Middle East. They have no any relation with Middle East. Even some scientists, Israeli scientists, did admit to that they have no connection, no roots. The names of the families never exist in the Middle East. They have no evidence connect them with Middle East. So those people are immigrants. Even Golda Meir did. I see Cheb one time, but she was immigrant. She come to Palestine, and she said she was under the Palestinian government in Palestine before 1948. Even Shamir, Shamir entered Palestine as a cleaning in work permit from the Palestinian Authority in Palestine at the time before 1948 as a cleaning worker. The one cleaning the streets and whatever. The Zionists, they have no connection with Palestine, no roots in Palestine, not not any evidence they have any roots in this country. If somebody want to consider me anti-Semitic, anti-whatever, no matter. But this is the truth, and even the Jewish scientists, they admit those facts. Today we see even the Jewish Americans in New York, they saying they have no right to be in Palestine. They have thousands and hundreds of thousands of Jewish. They are saying we don't have the right to be in Palestine. Not mean in the history somebody occupied Palestine and stay for a while in Palestine, that means he have the right to be in Palestine. The Arabs and the Muslims occupied Spain for 800 years. When the Arabs and Muslims was in Spain, the Jewish run from Europe and they hide in the Islamic country. It was in Al-Andalus, or in Spain. We call it Spain today. The atomic empire, which the Turkish controlled the whole world at the time, they was treating the Jewish very good under the atomic. They run from Europe and they come to the atomic. Arabs and Muslims always treat Jewish right. When the first immigrants Jewish come to Palestine before 1948, the Palestinians used to cook food and carry and give them and feed them. And
Judd, I'm sorry to cut you off. I don't mean to do that. I want to let Alice chime in, and then I want to give Cowboy a chance. But please stay up. We want to let you continue. I know you've made a lot of good points. Thanks for being patient, Cowboy. Alice, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting talking about the DNA and the history, because I myself, I live in Australia and I've got a Scottish English history, and yet if I converted to Judaism, I would be able to move to Israel and have all the appropriate rights as a citizen. And that's one of the things that sort of pushed me towards the cause for the Palestinians is, the fact that I would have more rights than people whose families have lived there for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So I think there's a bit of a disconnect when we're told, Israelis have a right to the land because they've got a connection, but then I could do it, and I literally have no connection from any of my ancestry. So yeah, that's that. I'm trying to talk earlier when Brenda was on, but that's fine. I find this all very, very interesting topic. So thank you very much for having me, Chip.
So interesting. Can I respond, Chip? Can't hear you. I don't know if your mic went out, Chip.
I can't hear him either.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, I muted because the dog was making some noise.
Oh, it's
Sure,
all good.
go ahead.
So, Amjad, let's try to unpack this here. First off, there is evidence that the Jews within Judea and Samaria did exist. That evidence is acknowledged not just by the Egyptians, but by the Babylonians. It's also acknowledged by the Greeks, specifically Thucydides. All right.
Sorry. No, guys, real quick. I'm not trying to cut you off. There's no doubt about that. I think what Amjad was trying to say, and I think what people are trying to refer to, is not that there aren't ethnic people who lived in the land from previous generations. I think what he's saying is the Zionist movement, if you study its origins, it's a European movement among Ashkenazi people of Ashkenazi Jewish descent who eyed as a homeland for all Jewish people areas of historic Palestine, and then lobbied for it. And then a massive number of people who weren't indigenous to the land, including those who convert and want to come, like was just said, came into the territories. And now most of whom occupy the territory are not native to it. I think that's the point that was trying to be made. Sorry to stop you. I just didn't want to have a lengthy discussion about all that biblical stuff.
So here's the thing is that I'm not going with the biblical sources. I mean, that's religious bias right there. I'm going with third party sources that lived in the time of that era. I mean, ever since the Bar Kokhba revolt, actually Zionism has traces going even further back. Zionism, as we know it today in this form, is a political national movement to be able to have a home for Jews, and that started in the 1850s. However, all right, at the same time, has it been corrupted and has it suited political needs for everybody else? Sure, but Zionism, a return to Zion in itself, started after the Bar Kokhba revolt during the Roman diaspora. So Amjad, also, you wanted to bring up DNA. DNA does not correlate or represent to indigeneity, all right? That's called a blood quantum. If you want to understand that, actually, in all reality, the Yahtzees back in pre-World War II used this same test to say that to explain that Jews were not European enough to be in Germany or in Europe or too white because of how much they may or may not have in their DNA. So yet again, DNA is not indicative of indigeneity, all right? Because if that were the case, then 30% of Europe would be somehow the same as Homo neanderthalis or Homo heidelbergensis. What causes or what are the that of indigeneity is what's brought in is culture, where they came from, ties to the land, which they have the same cultures that, or the same customs, practices, and traditions that Jews have had since 1230 BCE has been practiced and added on to since then. So yet again, DNA does not represent indigeneity, because if that were the case, then I would have indigenous roots with Ireland or Norway, because then while I have roots, I have no cultural reference or anything to them. All right. Yeah, I may be white skinned, but blood quantum is a form of racism, and I don't agree with that.
Let me jump in on that. I'm a little confused about the language, but I'm trying to understand what you said. So again, I really don't want to get back in. What I try to do in this conflict is study it from about 1880 onward. That's my barometer. Everybody sets it differently, has different conversations. I don't really care about that the indigeneity argument as much, although I understand that the massive numbers of folks who immigrated into the territories was, of course, it's like if we had 70 million people immigrating in the United States right now, it would be a disruptive thing to have happen on the southwest border. It's the ones that we do have coming in are disruptive to some. But I think the biggest thing that people like myself take issue with, and again, we talked about the 6-Day War. I can see the arguments that are being made to try to justify it. I just think that I think there are Israeli officials, and I have to find the source of this, but that they actually said that it was the fact that those things were used as precursors to attack were convenient reasons to do what had been on the planning table for some time. I'm paraphrasing, and that the desire is to take as much. Again, I think this is a general flavor of what's been going on here for a long time, and we see it acting out in different chapters. There's a desire, that's why someone mentioned the Greater Israel Project earlier. There's a desire among many in the Zionist movement to take back over all of the land that they perceive to be related to the return to Zion. And so I think when somebody brings up the indigeneity issue of it, I'm not as concerned about that as I am the behavior of the parties vis-a-vis those stated objectives. And the biggest thing I have a problem with is not so much that Israel wants to exist. I understand that thought. It's the total and utter impunity with which it acts in terms of how it mistreats another group of people. Not just and I'm not talking about the Arabs that live inside of Israel. I'm talking about the people in the areas in which Israel has chosen to do what it's done for, especially since 1967. The things that I've come to learn about what Israel does versus what Israel says it does is such a wide gap. It's truly shocking to me. And I think most people, regardless of how you feel about it, one way or the other, whom are made aware of this, have a complete change in perception. I'll give you an example of somebody real quickly who did that. There was a young Jewish American woman named Anna Baltzer, and she was being told by her friends that certain things were happening in the occupied territories that she just couldn't believe. She's like, you must be brainwashed. You're believing Palestinian propaganda. These people are terrorists, right on down the line. And so they said, I tell you what, Anna, next time you go back to Israel, which she had family there, go visit the occupied territories, find out for yourself. Don't listen to a word we say. Just come back and tell us what you think. And so she went to stay with a family in Ramallah for 6 months, just as a challenge. And then what she learned was shook her up so badly that she came back and she spent most of her adult life just trying to share what she learned with others because she was so shaken up by it. And there's a documentary that she put together on YouTube. I recommend everybody watch it, no matter how you feel about the conflict. It's very illuminating. to what life is really like under an occupation. And I had no idea how bad it was until I watched it. But it's called Life in Occupied Palestine by a young woman named Anna Baltzer. And she's done TED Talks, she's done other interviews, but this was one that she put together as sort of a summation of what she learned that she did not know before she had went there to go check it out. So those are the things I take the biggest issue with. It's not so much Israel wanting security. I understand that. I understand them wanting to stop what happened on October 7th. I think that's fair. But I think once you know the over-the-top things that Israel has been doing for such a long time to people it doesn't even need to do it to get what it wants, that's where I've taken such a position against what's being done. That's kind of what's drawn me to my position on this issue. So I'd love to talk all night, guys. Listen, it's a little bit after 10 o'clock. I normally only go till 9 o'clock. I tell you what, Cowboy, though, would you like to come back? I mean, you seem like you're somebody who's very passionate. You like the subject. Would you like to come back and talk again?
You know, Chip, it has been a pleasure talking with you. I know we don't agree on everything, but I'm sure there's quite a few things that we do agree with and everything. And have I heard your name in the past? Sure, I have. I'm just glad I had the ability to get up on this platform with you and speak on these terms in a civil manner, because there's been multiple times where you go on either pro-Israeli life, it becomes extremely toxic, but there are also quite a few individuals on both sides. One thing I would like to also just counterpoint and everything, yes, I do agree there are some extremists within the Zionist movement. There are actually sects of Judaism that actually does want to return to Israel proper, Weiss being one of them. However, that doesn't represent the whole, because if that were the case, then Hajj Ahmed al-Husseini represents the whole of all the Arabs that live in that land. So
Yeah,
I
that's
can't,
fair.
and I can't do that, okay? Because of the fact of the matter is, and I do have to agree with you on how the Palestinians or the people of Gaza are victimized, because they are victimized. They're victimized by H group over brainwashing on how much hate they have against the Jews. And that's a
Let's
victim
do
in
this.
itself.
Let's continue. We can talk about.
That's
We can
not
hold on real quick.
true.
I know.
No, that's great. I appreciate this conversation. Thank you
Let's
so much,
continue it
Chip.
later. Though.
Go
Yeah,
to bed. It's only 7 where I'm at. So I appreciate this very much.
Thanks for being here. Thanks, Cowboy. Have a good night. We'll talk
night.
again soon. Be
Thank
good.
you, Chip.
You know what? I'm gonna.
Real quick before we go, I want to just mention one thing in closing. I've heard that statement mentioned a lot before about quote unquote like indoctrination and hatred and this kind of thing. I think I've seen examples of it on both sides, but not to the extent that's claimed. And I don't think that outside groups who have looked at this have found much evidence to support the claims. I'm sure it's happened in some families where they've talked to their kids about hatred. I think what drives the anger, if I had to guess, if I'm trying to think what I would do under those circumstances, I wouldn't hate all the people in another group of people because of my plight. I would hate the government and the military who was deciding to do those things to me. And I think that's what drives the anger. I could be wrong. And I don't think there's widespread programming to try to teach Palestinian children to all act like militants and want to kill every Jew in the world. I think that's silly, because most people who are Palestinian or even Arab who are angry with the Israeli-Palestine situation don't go around the world killing Jews.
Chip, do you see the video where Israeli children write
Yeah,
letters in the bombs to
yeah.
the Palestinian
But
children?
real quick, let me do this because I think I want to be fair. So just as I saw instances of Palestinian children dressed up in like warlike garb and people point to that and say, look at these brainwashed kids. There was a recording from a Hebrew school, like a very ultra-religious Jewish school, where there's a rabbi or some other religious members that come into the teachers. They're asking the kids questions and they say, what do you think of the Arabs? Oh, they're bad. What do you think of Jews that aren't that religious? Oh, they need to learn the right way. There was all this, in other words, to point out that, hey, look, Jews are, I think they're both very minuscule on the edge of the curve type of behavior. I don't think they're pervasive in either society. I think the anger on the Palestinian side and the reason why people want to join militant groups like H Group is because they've had family members that have been killed. Drone strikes, military bombings, artillery, or maybe they've been martyred in other conflicts or whatever the case may be. And that's normally what drives people's behavior, is a response to an action. not so much a core hatred of others. Does it exist? Yeah, there are people that hate people that act on that hate. But I think that's a very, 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 very small number of extreme examples that almost never occur. So, I'd like to think that people are doing it for the reasons that they're trying to get out of their situation, not because of abject hatred. I know that a lot of people on the Israeli side, that's sort of one of the victim cards that gets played, like, oh, look at us, we're always hated. And they talk about the rise of anti-Semitism globally because of what's happening right now. I mean, remember, I don't want anybody to be made to feel uncomfortable if they're not someone directly involved in what's going on. That's, of course, fair. But listen, discomfort walking down the street, going to a restaurant, feeling like people are talking about you or making you feel uncomfortable is a lot different than a 2,000-pound bomb landing on your apartment building. So I understand the sensitivities there, but we got to keep it in perspective as well. Okay. I try to be fair. It's not because I'm trying to take sides, although I do tend to try to identify with those who I believe are oppressed. But like I said, if it were switched, and if the other side was Arab doing this to people who were Jewish, I would advocate for the Jewish people being oppressed, and I'd advocate against the Arab government. That's just being fair, I think. Okay? I try to. Thanks for being here, everybody, tonight. I'm sorry if I didn't get to all the guests. I think there was one more person in the guest queue, Frederico. I want to thank everybody for being here, though. I do this on Wednesday nights from 7 to 9 p.m. We went a little late tonight. And every Saturday from 12 noon Eastern until 3 or 4 p.m. usually, time dependent. If you want to find a recording of this tonight, if you want to hear, if you didn't hear all of it, or especially Cowboy, if you want to go back and hear some of the points we raised earlier that I think you referenced, but you hadn't heard what we talked about earlier, it'll be recorded onto my YouTube and my Rumble channels probably within the hour. You can reach them by going to the link in my bio. It just says Linktree Chip Barnes. If you're in the US, you can click on it. It'll take you there. If you're outside the United States, I've written that same information in my bio. You have to type it into your web browser and then hit enter. It'll take you there. You'll see my YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, and then you'll see some Telegram groups that I started for some conversation, as well as, if you'd prefer, donating. I'd love to have any help I get. I'm not doing this for money, but we all have basic expenses. I'm trying to meet mine, at least partially, from doing some of this work. So I'd love to have your help. If you can't, don't sweat it. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I will see you, if not sooner. Sometimes I do some different ones, but I'll see you no later than Saturday. Okay? Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for being here.